Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Development Control Committee on the 7th of October 2015. First thing I must do is your safety and the fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of the room. You go down the stairs and we meet in the War Memorial Park just outside. Next, we need a vice chairman, please, members. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Could I nominate Councillor Mrs. Tucker? Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. You're on the move. This meeting is being webcast, so you're live on the internet. And would you also switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent? Thank you. Now, just so that you all know, to the right and left of me are officers who will guide us in the members in their decisions. The members are sitting in that group there, and would public speakers please go up to the 4 seats up there which are marked visiting speakers. And to make the thing, to get the microphone to work, you press the long black button. We now move to the main agenda. I have no apologies for absence. Are there any? Substitutions. I have Councillor Robinson in place of Councillor Goodison and Councillor Miller in place of Councillor Leeks. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Urgent matters. I have no urgent matters. And we move on to the minutes of the committee meeting held on September the 9th. Are members happy that I sign these? Thank you. We move straight forward then to applications for planning, and item number 1, which is land west of Ganderdown Copse, Winchester Road, Dummer.
Thank you, Chairman. This first item is a hybrid application which seeks full planning permission for the redevelopment of a site extending to 21 hectares in size for the erection of a critical treatment hospital, a cancer treatment centre and its associated infrastructure, which also includes an energy centre, access from the A30 and a helicopter landing pad. There is also an outline element to this particular application where we have details of siting and means of access for proposed ambulance station and a pathology lab. I'd like to draw members' attention to the update paper. You will find details of the speakers, followed by an explanation of where the site was viewed from during the viewing panel held last week. We also have a further update from North Waltham Parish Council and a couple of further public observations. There are further comments also from the Basingstoke Access for All Working Group, and then we follow this on by some comments in relation to recent press releases, both from the Clinical Commissioning Group and from the applicant in response to that. Finally, on the update paper for this item, we have a revised condition, which is condition number 6, which addresses materials. And also I'd like to add verbally a further condition requiring prior approval of details for foul drainage. The application continues to be recommended for permission subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and conditions as detailed in the update paper and the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Right. I'll read out the public speakers. The first one's Dummer Parish, Julian Jones. Next is Waltham Parish Council. Is there somebody from there? Because I haven't got a name. No? Right, okay. Objectors, Mr. Pilcher and Ms. Rainbow. And in support, Mary Edwards, Mike Harns, Colin White and James Lehman. Ward councillors Frost and Golding will speak, as will the visiting councillor, Mr. Harvey. I beg your pardon, Councillor Harvey. Doctor. So we start off with Julian James, please. You will have 4 minutes, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Thank you. So I'm Julian Jones, Chairman of Dummer Parish Council. Dummer contains 190 dwellings, of which 150 are within the conservation area. The M3 and M30 run through the parish and the CTH site west of Ganderdown, above CA30, where it forms the northern parish boundary. Okay. You got all that anyway, I guess. Arable land and woodland copses, which are sinks, cover the majority of the area of the parish. The critical treatment hospital site has achieved yields consistent with its classification as good quality farmland. And in the last week, the farm manager at Wheatsheaf Farming Company, based at Southwood Farm, which farms the proposed site, was voted Farmers Weekly Arable Farmer of the Year. In my 4 minutes, I intend to address the Planning Officer's decisions on policy, the impact on the context of the Dummer Parish Conservation Area, the wider landscape, the Wayfarers Walk and the access to the countryside. The travel through country lanes from the locations to the south of the M3 and the traffic impact on the centre of Dummer. The site, on the policy decisions, the site is in the countryside and detached from the settlement policy boundary. The application is not supported by any fully detailed sequential analysis of all the sites examined by the HHFT as an alternative locations. The land value should not be afforded any weight as a planning consideration. The application has sought to establish that Save Policy 8 applies, but this is not a small-scale employment process, nor does it sit continuous to any settlement policy boundary as to be considered adjacent to a rural settlement, and therefore does not meet the requirements of Save Policy 8, nor is it enhancement of community facilities required by Save Policy C7. Similarly, the principle of centralised care is unproven at this stage. It's not supported by the NHS National 5-year forward view, and the CCG has stated that it cannot afford this development and that it will not go to public consultation. Therefore, there's no clear case that there is an overriding need for this development and for it to go ahead in the public interest. The applicant maintains that the site will be close to the settlement boundary if the sites in the emerging local plan are approved. But Mr. Nabier has reminded the committee members in a letter that the paragraph 216 of the NPPF discourages over-reliance on emerging untested planning policies in the development control process, and specifically warns that emerging plan policies should not be relied upon where there is unsolved objections to relevant policies, and there certainly are those, as we've seen in the last few days. Approving this application in the countryside when there is no commitment by the CCG will leave a blighted site where the principle of development has been approved and the future
1 minute to go.
A future application could exploit this to develop a warehouse, a head office building, or even establish a foreign-owned private hospital. At the viewing committee members will have seen the impact of this 6-storey building, 3 of which are above the ridgeline, on the context of the Dummer Conservation Area and its important views, and also on the wider landscape, the Wayfarers Walk, and access to the countryside. Our objective should be to encourage healthy lifestyles, not to make footpaths more dangerous. Travel to the site and displaced by the development is a concern. The officer's report includes a requirement for 106 contributions that include routing and directional signage strategy, completion of highway works as required by the Hampshire County Council. A routing and directional signage strategy fails to resolve the lack of suitable routes to the CTH from Alton, Alresford in the south and from Overton, Oakley in the north. This simply ducks the issue. Highway works are vital to mitigate the traffic impact on the centre of Dummer. Creation of a new roundabout on the A30 to the CTH access will cause congestion on the A30 during shift changes. This plus increased queuing at the Southwood Light Control Junction.
Please?
I've got 3 more lines.
Right.
Will result in commuters choosing to route through the centre of Dummer. The junction of Tower Hill and the A30 must be remodelled to prevent the right turn into the village for vehicles travelling north towards Basingstoke and the M3 on the A30. I urge you to protect our countryside and the villages and their amenity value for all of Basingstoke's residents by refusing this application or at least delaying it until the future health provision in North Hampshire is decided by the CCG.
Thank you. Can you just wait there and see if members, any questions for Mr. Jones? No questions? Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Pilcher and Ms. Rainbow, please.
Chairman, I represent the following objectives: the Campaign to Protect Rural England, North Waltham Action Group, the Dummer Action Group, Natural Basingstoke, Cycle Basingstoke, and Major Cake from Dummer. In their statement dated the 23rd of September, the National Health Service Clinical Commissioning Group report that the whole system of care in North and West Hampshire is now being looked at again. That this proposal does not have their approval, and this site may not be relevant to future National Health Service plans and may never be needed. I quote, "The conclusion of this review, which is being recommended to our CCG governing bodies for approval, is that this proposal cannot go forward to formal consultation at present. We are now recommending that we launch a whole system programme to redesign health and social care across North and Mid Hampshire. It will encompass acute, community, mental health, primary and social care. There are other potential options, but it is still possible that a new critical treatment hospital near Junction 7 of the M3 might emerge as part of the preferred option for the new health and social care model, and if so, would be part of the public consultation at that stage. Bearing in mind the proposal is for major development and growing on 50 acres of greenfield land in a critical strategic gap, bang in the middle of the conservation villages of North Waltham and Dummer and the conurbations of Basingstoke and Oakley, and if granted, it will no doubt be the precursor to further development in this area, that it is directly contrary to and does not comply with the relevant policies of the draft local plan, that there are no proposals to create satisfactory cycle access and it will significantly increase motor traffic, that the officer's report itself states that the development will have a significant and adverse effect on the landscape character, that there is no detailed and public assessment of possible less environmentally damaging alternatives, including sites near a Sainsbury's, and that the Trust has stated in their application that one of the main reasons they have chosen this site is because it can be acquired at lower cost. This is exactly why planning policies protect such greenfield sites in open countryside. It is not a planning consideration. It is thus too early to say whether the proposed site is in fact relevant to future NHS needs. It would surely be wrong at this stage to grant permission for the development of a hospital, which it now transpires may never be
1 minute to go.
This new information has significantly changed the balance. And for all these reasons, we would respectfully request the committee to refuse, or at the very least, defer the application until the situation becomes less stable.
Thank you, Mr. Pilcher. If you just wait there. Members, have you any questions for Mr. Pilcher? No? Okay, thank you very much. Now, I understand there is somebody from North Waltham here.
I am here. I'm James Rowley, is going to speak on our behalf.
Right, thank you. Yeah. You are on behalf of the Parish Council, is that correct?
Speaking on behalf of North Waltham Parish Council.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
4 minutes.
This is a strategic development covering 50 acres and potentially employing over 1,000 staff moved from other hospital sites. However, the Council haven't applied their normal policies related to employment development, or which seek to protect the countryside in the officer's recommendation, including requiring a sequential test to be followed through considering other sites which are either brownfield or closer to the built-up area of Basingstoke. The National Policy Planning Framework requires that new development accords with the local plan and is based on the principle of sustainable development. This application does neither. The Trust has stated on several occasions in their application that one of the main reasons they wish to choose this site is because it can be acquired at lower cost. Clearly this is not a planning consideration, and there are many policies in the Basingstoke and Deane local plan which seek to protect the countryside against greenfield site development. The development is not in a sustainable location in transport terms, having total reliance on access by car. As stated by Dummer Parish Council's objection, extending bus route 8 for 3 years, which presently only runs to Hatch Warren and takes between 25 minutes and an hour to reach the town, will not represent an attractive alternative to travelling to the site by car. There will be substantial additional traffic, some of which will come through North Waltham and off the 303, and some of which will use the narrow lanes accessing the site. It is proposed that Trenchard Lane, which is 3 metres wide, is used as emergency access for the site. This is totally unsuitable and will lead to traffic conflicts in the lane, which will affect local residents in our parish. The officer's report notes that the development would have a significant and adverse effect on the landscape character, and yet this material consideration is given little weight. The application proposes a large 6-storey tower block in open countryside, and yet no real efforts in its design or landscaping have been made to mitigate the visual effects of the building on long views or the rural character of the surrounding area. In recommending approval, the Council would be making an exception to all its existing policies and setting a precedent for development of the open countryside around Basingstoke. The report states that the application will be meeting a need
1 minute to go.
identified by Hampshire Hospital Foundation Trust. However, the clinical commissioning body, which will provide the funding and needs to support the loan application for this proposal, has stated in the minutes of their board meeting that it is both unaffordable and that they are not going to pursue further public consultation at the present time. I would therefore ask why our councillors are being asked to approve a major application contrary to all adopted planning policies when this is clearly premature to the decision to actually fund and progress the project. At the very least, the application should be deferred until more certainty can be provided over its actual delivery.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley. If you just wait there. Any questions from members? No? Thank you, Mr. Rowley. Now we move on to those in support. Mary Edwards, Mike Harris, Colin White and James Lehman. Yes, it is. You will have 4 minutes and I'll give you 1 minute's notice at the end.
Good evening. Thank you for the consideration of this application and for the officer's report, which we see as a fair and balanced assessment of the project. Formal public consultation was held in February 2015. Public events were advertised to over 4,000 properties and businesses in the area, and over 450 people attended over 2 days. Despite extensive local press coverage, we have only received 109 public representations. In response to consultation, changes have been proposed to the application. Principally, this results in the removal of works to Trenchard Lane, and for the site access here to be downgraded to emergency access only, which results in a reduced highways impact and ecological impact on the lane. The justification for the site, we believe, is clear. It is the most appropriate location when balancing the wider needs of the size of the patient catchment area, the centres of population, and the need to ensure fast access to the site for ambulances. The South Coast Ambulance Trust have confirmed this. Environmental impact assessment has demonstrated that there is capacity within the highway network to safely accommodate traffic, and the proposals include significant landscape planting for mitigation and to increase ecological biodiversity. There will be no increased flood risk, nor overriding significant impact on residential amenity. Any impacts arising are localised and limited in nature, and your officer's recommendation is supportive of this. The Trust understand their responsibilities. The accompanying Section 106 agreement provides for a landscape and ecological management plan, funding for public transport to be secured through a contribution to the rerouting of the number 8 bus service, a travel plan to encourage staff to car share and use sustainable methods of transport, and a routing and signage strategy to address the local issues in relation to Dummer and North Waltham. In summary, you have before you a unique opportunity to grant planning consent to secure development which will support the sustainable future of Basingstoke and the wider Hampshire area.
Thank you. Our goal in creating a critical treatment hospital is to deliver better, safer hospital services for our sickest patients, predominantly those who are brought to us in a blue light ambulance or air ambulance in a life-threatening condition, about 15% of what we do. The location was selected to ensure the majority of our population could benefit by fast access by road or air. Our doctors have worked closely with local GPs to develop a plan that means North Hampshire will be only the second region in the UK to deliver 24/7 consultant treatment for patients where time is crucial to their survival. This model of care has strong support from our partners in the ambulance service and is supported by our clinical commissioners. It fits perfectly with government policy, which is based on evidence that fast access to expert doctors saves lives and reduces long-term disability. We would also create a cancer treatment centre to provide radiotherapy and chemotherapy. This means we will offer cancer patients a local service. They will no longer need to do daily journeys to Southampton or Guildford to receive life-saving treatment.
1 minute to go.
The Cancer Treatment Centre has huge support from local people who are actively fundraising for it. Our proposal is self-financing by Hampshire hospitals and will enable us to reduce the cost of delivering our most expensive services. It is not being funded by CCGs. Centralising offers the flexibility to cope with the significant increase of population in North Hampshire, which applies not just to our sickest patients but the rest of our service, which is 85% of what we do, maintaining current hospitals in Basingstoke and Winchester. In summary, we strongly believe the proposal to create a critical treatment hospital and cancer centre is better for patients, better for NHS finances, and helps us create capacity for the growing population of North Hampshire. Can I assure the committee that we are very conscious of our responsibility to adhere to the conditions you propose, and thank you for consideration of our proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Members, do you have any questions? Thank you. Councillor Taylor first, followed by Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much. The concept of need is how much we need this is obviously absolutely key in our policies, especially policy D8 for rural exceptions. We have to prove a need for it. You have obviously, as an applicant, have said that there is a need for this sort of specialist critical care unit. However, we see that the CCGs are saying that the need is for a whole system model of care. So, in a sense, you're saying the need is for one thing, and the CCG, who understand are key in bringing this into being, are saying something opposite. How are we to reconcile these two approaches?
Thank you. I think we come at it from different angles. The CCG's role is to purchase services for the whole population it covers. That includes hospital services, but also primary care, community care, mental health. They have to look at the whole lot. They are facing inflation-only income increases over the next few years, and their concern is how do they make that pot go further and do more for our populations. Our concern is to deliver high-quality, safe services for the sickest of those patients. That's what we do, and our proposal is about doing that. It will not change the amount of money that CCGs need to spend on hospital care. We will be able to deliver the very sickest end better and safer as a result of this.
Thank you very much, and I understand that, but what I'm talking about isn't really finance. It's actually the CCG are quoting the 5-year forward view, which is obviously looking at the whole of healthcare in the country, and are saying that they are moving now towards the whole system model of care, and they don't mention the actual finance problem.
I think their issue is that they need to look at how they do that whole model of care within the limited finances they've got. So that is the driving factor for them. Their job is to look at the whole population. My job is to make sure I deliver safe care for those who are sickest. And I have to listen to our clinical experts, our consultants who deliver that care and save the lives day in and day out. And that is what they are telling me would make care safer.
So are you actually saying, therefore, I haven't understood this, that the 5-year forward view is like a financial assessment rather than a medical need assessment?
Sorry, I didn't explain that bit properly. So the 5-year forward view is an analysis that shows we need to change the way we do the whole of healthcare so that we can spend less and do more with it. It's the same problem that local authorities have. It is encouraging all sorts of new ways of doing things, but one of the things that is very clear, brought out by the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Bruce Keogh, is actually if you're going to save the lives of those in extremis, you need consultants, the most expert doctors, 24/7. We would only be the second in the country to deliver that with this model.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move away from that particular one, Mary, and I'll move to your colleagues, because I've got a couple of technical questions. In the report, there's much made of Trenchard Lane, and it says it's for emergency access. What access does the public have to Trenchard Lane?
Hello, it's Colin White from Connect, highway consultant working on this project. The idea is that Trenchard Lane would not be used for any access to the hospital other than in the instance when the roundabout was not available. So we're talking about an extreme event. So generally, access to the hospital for all users will be via the roundabout.
I'm afraid you didn't answer my question. What generally, day to day, could the public access Trenchard Lane?
The existing use of Trenchard Lane will not be altered from current.
Thank you very much. Moving on to something else. Regretfully, there's no road map in here that identifies Trenchard Lane within the report, because all we have in the back of this report are screenshots, which are unannotated. They're not annotated at all. We don't have the luxury of studying this kind of map before we got the report. But the design seems like, and I felt uncomfortable with this, is that 6 stories of what I would describe simply, so most people understood it, as Lego blocks are being put in the middle of the countryside. I happened to be watching Breakfast TV last week, and a new children's hospital was opened in Liverpool, and it had a remarkably, how can I put it, radical design, but there wasn't hardly a square corner on it. And it was designed, they sort of emphasized the children's aspect and everything else, but I think the curves that were described and were shown in that particular hospital would lend itself much better to a countryside that has, and we've seen some of the long-range shots here, would blend in much better.
Do we have a question?
Yes, the question is, why wasn't that approach taken to make the design, instead of the square blocks, much more sympathetic to its countryside setting?
Thank you. From a design point of view, the architectural intent behind it is to... Well, there's 2 principal issues. One is to pick up on the idea of a hospital in a wood. So that's partly the reason why there is an awful lot of landscape planting within the proposals. And also part of that landscape planting is to, and that's a particularly good example, part of it is for mitigation, for long-range views, and part of it is because there are real health benefits for patients to be able to have views of nature, of woods, as part of their recovery. It has a calming effect. I don't think any of us could deny that. In terms of the design itself, the approach is to, one of the first things that were looked at was the local sort of mosaic of fields, for want of a better term, patchwork of fields. And the idea was, you can see on there, is that by incorporating green roofs into the design, and by breaking up the mass to some extent by having different heights across the site, it was reflecting that idea, and that's partly why the courtyards are there within the development, and partly why some of the, or many of the public areas, the plaza, the public square in front of the building, and the car parks are designed in that way. The other significant issue is the clinical requirements drive the design of a hospital in a certain way. I'm not a clinician. Others in the room are a much better place to be able to explain sort of clinical adjacencies. But the principle of how a patient arrives at the front entrance in the back of an ambulance or a helicopter, and how they move through the emergency department and through theatres and through diagnostic imaging and then up to wards in which to recover, there are very complex interdependencies, and that it does drive the design in some ways. I hope that goes some way to answer the question.
Yes, go ahead.
I think the point I was trying to make was I fully understand the functional requirements inside a hospital. What I was suggesting, that a mitigation, not from the ground level, which you've adequately described, of these various avenues and sort of open spaces, is the external appearance of this from a distance, because it's just been mentioned by some of the objectors. You've got 3 stories hitting a ridge line. Now, we've had this kind of discussion with the planning department here on other sites, and it's a principle in planning. You try and avoid a ridge line, and anything that appears above the ridge line you try and mitigate and either bring it down or make it, I tried to put it before, to blend it in to the surroundings. What goes on underneath it is absolutely the functional description that you've described. I've got no problem with that. It's just the mitigation that could have been applied in the design. Was that not possible?
In terms of long-distance views, probably refer back to the boundary treatment. There's an awful lot of landscape treatment around the edge of the site, and I refer to the submission documents which show how that will mature over the years. Certainly on the northern boundary, so as you travel up Trenchard Lane, along that top track there is significant planting. In terms of materials, that is a condition that needs to be discharged if you were to grant planning consent tonight. That is something that still does need to be agreed. Sorry. Is that better? I was explaining the landscape boundary treatment all the way around the edges. There is imagery, and this is a particularly good example. So this is the view looking directly into the site from the top of Trenchard Lane, from the top of the site. You can see the existing view at the top. So it's a worked field. Year 1 is planting, so you can start seeing that trees are starting to be planted and they're starting to grow. And you can see actually, if you have a look very carefully at proposed year 1, you can see the building through the gap in the trees, and broadly where the mouse is being highlighted now, thank you. But if you go to year 15, because of the density of the tree planting, which has been an embedded principle from the start, so it's picking up on your question in relation to materials, a key principle from the start was landscape treatment, and it links to this idea of the hospital in the wood. Other viewpoints demonstrate a similar thing.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Taylor again.
Thank you. Sorry to ask again. I do just want to return to the question of Trenchard Lane, because all 3 parish councils have expressed a great concern about the effect on the country roads around this hospital site. And in fact, North Waltham is right in the middle of that country road complex. You've said, I can't remember who it was who was answering, has said that there won't be public access along Trenchard Lane to the hospital itself, but quite obviously people are going to travel along Trenchard Lane to get onto the A30 to get into the main entrance to the hospital. And if you're going to be travelling from the north or the northeast, you're hardly going to go all the way down to the A30 to get there. And I'm sure your sat-nav will send you through the country lanes. Do you have any answer to this problem? There's clearly going to be a lot of congestion.
Well, obviously Trenchard Lane does form an access route for many existing users of the highway network, and clearly we can't distinguish precisely between somebody who might wish to use the hospital versus somebody who's going on another journey. But if you were to look at the catchment area for the hospital, you would see that most of the traffic is going, well, the vast majority of the traffic is going to come from the M3 A30 direction to the east. And although I couldn't deny that anybody would use Trenchard Lane, the numbers of people likely to use it would be very small. So that would be my answer to you.
Thank you. Any more questions, member? Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, going back to, you addressed the landscaping of the site, and you've explained to us how you've dealt with the boundaries. But I'm considerably worried that the trees you've planned are not going to screen this in anything like this time that you say. A 6-storey building is going to be at least 80 feet high. Could you tell me what trees you're going to plant that are going to grow to 80 feet in 15 years? Because I don't know of any. And as the gentleman to my left pointed out, this is a very, very angular construction. The lines of the upper stories could have been softened considerably.
Thanks. In terms of the details of the trees to be planted, I'll be perfectly honest, I can't answer that question right now. The reason being, well, there's 2 reasons. If you were to grant permission tonight, there is a condition within the proposed conditions from the officers, which requires details of hard and soft landscaping. So that would be discharged at a later date, and we wouldn't be able to do any works on site until that's been discharged. And the second one is the landscape and ecological management plan. So that is both a condition, it's actually spread across 2 conditions within the officer's report, and is included within Section 106 agreement. And that requires the Trust, both formally as part of their planning consent, but also legally as part of their Section 106 obligations, to provide planting and landscape treatment that satisfies the officers, and that gives the officers satisfaction, and through officers, members, the satisfaction that the impacts are addressed. I think to some extent there is no denying that the hospital is going to be visible. It is a relatively large development on what is currently a greenfield agricultural site. However, officers have also highlighted the emerging local plan, the future direction of growth for Basingstoke in a sort of southwesterly direction, many down at the at the northwest, dropping down towards the golf course and down the hill towards Southwood Farm. I absolutely understand the concerns at this point in time that it is distinct, but that is the direction of travel. The proposals do mitigate the impacts, and the controls that are in place through the permission, through the 106 agreement, hopefully give the comfort that the details will be agreed.
Thank you. The trees are fine, and I'm sure that'll be fine, but you haven't answered the question as to why such a big building in a rural area has been designed so in such an angular fashion as to be as intrusive as possible before those trees grow to the height you say they will, which I think probably won't be in my lifetime. The building itself should have been made more suitable for the area rather than relying on vegetation growing up which will not screen it.
I think to some extent the design is a function of the site. So the site, as you will be aware, rises up from the A30 in a fairly gradual fashion, hits a ridge and tapers off towards the top boundary. In addition to picking up this idea of the mosaic of fields and the sort of the patchwork effect, which to some extent explains why certain, not buildings but parts of the building are in certain places. So you can see on that image why the across the front part of it is part of the green roofs are raised. By restraining the building across the site rather than spreading it out, it's ensured that more of the site isn't used. So we've restricted the built area to within a smaller area. I'm not an architect, and the architect isn't here to respond to the question, but the design and the rigidity of the design, I suppose, is a function of everything put together, really. It's the site, it's the topography, it's the clinical adjacencies. Design is incredibly subjective. There's no denying that. The materials that are proposed at the moment are a muted palette, but again, that's a condition to be discharged. We've moved away from the idea of any form of sort of significant reflective material to reduce any impacts in that sense. One of the changes that was made in August was to lighten the base of the building, so it's the plinth that runs around. You can see on that image it's beneath the green roof, runs across the front towards, hopefully you can see where the ambulances are on the, thank you. So that plinth section has been lightened, and it's a proposal at the moment is for a chalk type material to reflect local geology. I don't know if there's anything further I can say really on that.
Thank you, but as I say, more than anything, it's the upper stories that I'm worried about. They are going to be the most visible for the residents around there. I think probably your comment that you're not an architect, and I appreciate that, and the architect isn't here to answer the question, is probably the most relevant thing regarding this. Thanks anyway.
Councillor Potter, followed by Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether Mary Edwards would answer this or the agent. I mean, it's on the same theme, first of all. If I can just state the obvious and then get a comment. I mean, this is a significant hospital building which can't be screened entirely, can't be hidden away on a site of this nature, but presumably the principle is that where landscaping can mitigate the appearance to some extent, that will be part of the landscape condition that you, as the proposer of this development, will agree with the planning authority. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct. That's absolutely right. The conditions that are proposed require landscaping to mitigate where possible, and the landscape management plan, which is required before any other works would proceed on site, at the satisfaction, or to the satisfaction rather, of the officers. That's absolutely right.
Following on from that, if I may, I mean, presumably again the principle will be that as a hospital this needs to be functional in the first place for it to work for all our benefits and for it to work well. That's the primary design concept, I would have thought, is it not? So that's the approach that the architect would have developed in this regard, I guess, isn't it? Given the brief from the trust in the first place, yeah?
If I answer the steer we gave the architect, again, as you obviously know, I'm not an architect, but the steer very much was the doctors and the nurses have worked out quite cleverly a very different way of running a very, very acute hospital, so that the patient who's partially diagnosed in the ambulance or in the air ambulance by the paramedic, so roughly they know what's wrong with them as they're arriving, they can then triage them very quickly and get them straight onto the scanner or straight into the right sort of doctor. So if it's a heart attack, they go straight to cardiology. They don't stop anywhere else. Stroke, straight into the CT scanner. So the design was very much influenced by our clinicians saying, I need this to be next to this and that to be next to that. So I say I'm not an architect, but that was the steer that they were given in terms of clinical functionality.
And just finally, Chair, if I may, staying with Mary, I think really, in regard to, and it's probably in the report if I've missed it, but we're talking about 15% obviously of the patient numbers that the Trust obviously is overall responsible for. I don't know what that equates with, what your estimate of that would be, but the other point I want to confirm with you, am I right in saying that, as I understand it, the concept of the critical treatment is that people will stay in this unit for the minimum period and they'll be moved on to other NHS hospitals, obviously, hopefully NHS hospitals, as quickly as possible for the continuation of their treatment. The point I'm getting to there, in terms of traffic flow, people coming to and from the hospital, there is not likely to be the traditional visits to patients by visitors that you would get in any other setting. This is going to be minimal and for a very limited period. Is that right?
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely right. So these are mainly patients in extremis, and if any of you have sadly been in that position, you'll know the number of general visitors who come to see you are very limited. It's normally really is the nearest and dearest, and also they actually stay in the hospital quite a long time because they're very worried about their relatives. So we will have facilities to support them to stay, so that will minimise the toing and froing. The other thing, if it isn't obvious, is the major transport movement of people in and out of a main hospital site, like the other one in Basingstoke, is outpatients. We have 5,500 attendances a year. None of those will be going to this hospital, and that generates a lot of the car toing and froing, just to give you a feel.
Councillor Bound?
No longer required, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We've heard a lot about the landscaping. Are you prepared to look at the building? Because we have a lot of people here tonight saying, for want of a better word, it's a bit of a monstrosity. It's 6 floors high, it's like a box, and there are other designs that you can use. I'm not saying you have to do anything inside, but you could mitigate the angles on the design. It's a shame your architect's not here tonight.
Thank you. Apologies that there aren't. We are limited in the number of people that are available to speak. We fielded a team that we thought would answer the questions that might be raised. In terms of design, the design is in the application that's before you. That's what we're seeking planning permission for tonight. In terms of subtleties within there, there's details of materials, which again refer to my comment earlier in the condition that's in the officer's report and in the update paper. Materials do have to be agreed at a later date.
Councillor Tomlin?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm slight change of tact. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. It's about services, whether there's anybody there that can help me. But we have in the report we have from the officers, Thames Water, no objection. But if you want to join our network, you'll have to do a study, and it's 1.3 kilometres away. So have you any more information you can give us on that front, like what conversations you've had, what their feeling is? Because it's we do get a vague thing usually from Thames Water, but it's quite important part of a hospital, I should imagine. And I'll have another question afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I'm not a not a foul water specialist, so forgive me on that. In terms of Thames Water, discussions have been engaged in throughout the course of the pre-planning of the project. There is a foul pumping station within the site to accommodate the needs. My understanding is that the conversations are in process and an agreement is in place to make provision. It's just a case of sort of public and statutory agencies being what they are. In these days, they're not going to commit to something until they know that they have to commit, but the principle is absolutely accepted, and the means are there to be able to deliver.
Thank you. And the other one is just a general question, waste from hospitals and the sort of nature of your intended business there. Have you, I can't read anywhere, are you proposing to burn clinical waste through an incinerator in your energy plant?
No, so the energy plant is purely there to serve the needs of the development. And it is there, it is designed in such a way as to be a sustainable fuel source for the development. So no.
So if I may, what are you going to do with your clinical waste?
It's very rare these days that hospitals have incinerators. I'm afraid I am old enough. I do remember when we used to all have them. But now we transport it through registered suppliers is the wrong word, isn't it? The opposite. People who take it all away. And they have to be heavily regulated and so on. So we already have a contract with an agent like that, and it will continue in that way.
Any more questions, members? Right. Thank you all for very much. Now we move on to the ward councillors, Councillor Frost and Councillor Golding, who have 4 minutes each. Better if you go over there.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Councillor Frost, and I represent the ward of North Oakley, Oakley and North Waltham and Dummer. I've been asked to come here tonight by some residents and also North Waltham Parish Council, whose objections to this application are well documented by officers in one or more of the appendices which have been given. I don't want to speak too much and rehash the MPPF, which I know the parish councils and other people have been speaking very eloquently on. But what I want to consider is the need of is the basis of need. Okay, we need to understand, okay, that the road infrastructure is completely inadequate. We're building on a greenfield site, and as we've heard before, which will have an extremely detrimental impact on the landscape. So we then need to look at what is needed, and for me, really, the basis of need has to fall to the Clinical Commissioning Group. In that letter dated the 23rd September, which has been referred to by other people, I signed on behalf of Graham Wallins, on behalf of the North Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group, and Heather Housechild of the West Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group. Okay, to reach an informed decision, we've taken into account a number of facts, including our acute commissioning strategy, a health gate weight review, and a review by the Wessex Clinical, the Health Clinical Review and the Wessex Clinical Senate, and have again reviewed our financial position. The conclusion of this review, which is being recommended to our Clinical Commissioning Group governing bodies for approval, is that this proposal cannot go forward to formal consultation at present. So, therefore, as far as I'm concerned, here, Chair, the need for this building just isn't there at this particular time, and therefore I have to say that I urge the committee to either refuse the permission for the granting of the building permission here, or at least deferring it until after the clinical commissioning group have held their reviews. I do actually have the letter here, which for the point of balance, I'm happy to read out if under questions. So, the problem I do have is that, you know, I've seen the plans here, and I think it would be wonderful to have some of the cancer treatment units, and also I see the benefits of having the acute unit here. But the CCGs, who are the experts in the field, at the moment have decreed that there is no need for this. There is no need for a new one here. So, having said that, having stated my permission to the committee that if the committee is minded, okay, that we actually refuse permission. If the committee is minded to approve the application, I would like to draw your attention to the list of 17 traffic and infrastructure improvements in the paper update that was that's been it's basically a culmination of a lot of hard work by North Waltham Parish Council. In there are they give the local traffic issues according to the North Waltham area, and they also have some proposed solutions. I don't profess to actually go through, okay, but these solutions are all required to ensure that the residents of my ward do not pay the ultimate price of losing their lives while patients are being blue lighted into this facility, and also being very and having concerned visitors, okay, using the shortcuts, which will undoubtedly be at speed. I urge your committee to either refuse planning permission or at least please defer this until the clinical commissioning group have actually conducted their reviews.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Councillor Miller?
Yes, Chair. I've heard various press reports on the radio, and I think there's something on South Today about this on the CCG, and Councillor Frost has just quoted from this letter, which I've never seen, and I don't believe it was contained within this report. It's very disturbing that it seems that it's all coming together as far as the CCG is concerned. They've expressed their desires. Is there anything more in this letter that we need to hear? Because people quoting from various documents within a DC, if it's material to our decision, I think we either should have a formal distribution of that letter, or maybe Councillor Frost can read the letter. I don't know how long it is. But it's part of the equation that we're going to reach a decision upon. And, you know, we've heard a ward councillor describing that what he is suggesting we should take as a decision in this committee.
Well, I think if you refer to the update paper, it's mentioned there.
It's mentioned, it's not there in total. What else is there in the letter that we have to consider?
Well, we could read it out if you wanted that, but we could wait until questions to officers.
Fine, I'll leave it to questions to officers, if that's the way you would like to do it, Chair. No problem.
Good, thank you. Councillor Frost.
Sorry, Chair, I do actually have a copy here. I'm more than happy to read it. It's only 6 short paragraphs.
I think we'll wait till we get to questions to officers.
Thank you, Chair.
Afraid you can't come back. No more questions for Councillor Frost. Four minutes, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Thank you, Chair. 2 weeks ago I had a very helpful meeting with the case officer, and I told her that I would be supporting this application unless some major new fact emerged. Well, as we've heard repeatedly, a major new fact has emerged, this letter from the CCGs, in which they do say that they do not agree that a proposed critical treatment hospital should go forward at present, and that there are other potential options. The primary reason for this is that for this reason they're now recommending that we launch a whole system programme to redesign health and social care across North and Mid Hampshire. This programme will engage the public at every stage. It will be clinically led and will encompass acute, community, mental health, primary and social care. The object will be to design a health and social care model which is high quality and affordable. That letter undermines the whole basis on which this application has been recommended for approval. The case officer acknowledges on page 60 of 188 that the proposed development would inevitably result in a significant, permanent and whole-scale change to the views of the site as well as the local landscape character. That is enough to rule out this application unless it brings some overriding public benefit. In the section on need in her report on page 56, the officer gives great weight to the evidence of the hospital that this development would be the preferred clinical model. This is the foundation stone for her conclusion that the public benefits would outweigh the harm to the landscape and the character and appearance of the area. However, the CCGs, who are relevant clinical experts, don't agree with the hospital's evidence, and they consider that the way forward lies in a much wider whole system programme, which they also describe as a national initiative. Granting permission in the absence of clear evidence of need and public benefit would be contrary to the protection in the NPPF for valued landscapes and the best and most versatile agricultural land. Now, members of DC might be tempted to grant permission on the basis that no harm would be done if the CCGs didn't support it and it never gets built. But that would be wrong in principle and practice. Once you've conceded the principle of development on this site, the door can never be closed. If this hospital doesn't get the necessary funding or CCG support, would we want a private hospital on the site? The officer recommendation for approval provides the hospital and the CCGs with enough certainty that development of a critical treatment hospital on this site would be viable if the CCGs eventually concluded that this was the right clinical way forward. It doesn't need permission tonight. However, I am conscious that, as Councillor Foster said, DC may feel under considerable pressure to grant permission, so I have a few comments should you feel inclined to go down that road. First, all three parish councils have commented on the transport implications of this proposed development, and contrary to what the hospital said, I think there will be considerable movements of staff and of visitors to the maternity unit. Dummer are concerned about route running through their village, North Waltham are concerned about Highland Safeway, Oakley are concerned about the traffic on Trenchard Lane. The officer's recommendation refers to a travel plan, an access and parking plan, and a routing and directional signage strategy, and these are very welcome, but I couldn't see anything in the report that determines the contents of these documents. It would be very helpful if the committee could do whatever you can to ensure that those documents address the concerns raised by all three parish councils. Perhaps there could be a condition or an advisory. Second, the issue of light pollution is of particular concern to the residents of Dummer, who would have a view of the proposed hospital from their bedroom windows. And I commend the case officer for the comprehensive nature of proposed condition 10, and I should be grateful if the committee would endorse the importance of having a scheme which minimises the light pollution, particularly from the windows of the 6 or 7 storey CTH. Thirdly, and this is not strictly a planning matter, but the people who would lose most from this proposed development are the residents of Ganderdown Cottages, between the A30 and the hospital, and it would be very helpful if the committee could encourage the hospital to do all that they can to mitigate their loss of amenity and to compensate them for it. And just finally, I appreciate I'm over time, I would like to commend the case officer for her approach to this, which has been a very difficult and inevitably contentious, and I know she spent a lot of time listening to me and members of the parish councils and residents, and I think it has been an excellent way of proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want any questions for Councillor Go? No? Okay, thank you, Councillor. Now we have the visiting councillor, Councillor Harvey. You have 4 minutes, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening as a visiting councillor. I guess I'm speaking for the residents in my ward and those whose lives are going to be saved by this acute hospital because of the change, the step change that it will provide to healthcare in our town and borough and throughout the region that the Trust serves, really. I'm also speaking for the cancer patients who will have dramatically improved care as a result of the cancer care unit that will mean they won't have to travel to London or to Southampton or to other hospitals in the way they have been doing, because we will have a first-class and amazing facility on our doorstep. And let's not forget, this is Basingstoke. This is also a service that will affect Eastleigh and Winchester and Andover, but it's being chosen and being proposed and put forward here in Basingstoke. And that is a really important point that we need to bear in mind when deciding where this facility should go. And at the end of the day, it's a hospital. This is what it is. Yes, the hospital have made tremendous attempts, I think, and the officers go through that in the report to mitigate the impact of the building, to mitigate the impact of what it's about. Hampshire Highways haven't objected at all. The issues raised on highways, the issues raised throughout the paper are addressed by Hampshire Highways, and they do not object, despite all the considerations and the concerns. That is a fundamental point. And just to bear in mind, when you drive into Cambridge and you see Addenbrooke's, you see it, it's there, because it's positioned in a particular place to service the need required. The same with Radcliffe in Oxford. The clinicians who have led this, and I've listened to them, have told us why this is being placed where it is, the reasoning behind the motivations of all of it for this hospital being where it is. And that is something I think that is very important to bear in mind and consider with the officer report, which supports the application and recommends approval. So on access, the conditions are there. On highways, the conditions are there and they're addressed in the report. In terms of building and design and the quality of what is proposed, I think it is excellent, actually. I really do. Compared to what we see and what we will have, you look at the hospital that we've got and look at the improvements that will be made with a brand new building and the kind of care that would be on offer. I think on purely planning grounds, there is no reason to reject or defer this application. You're going to be searching for reasons to reject this rather than having fundamental reasons that would justify, I believe, a rejection or a deferral. And as far as the financial issues, the speculation that's going round from the CCG, I would be fascinated to understand their motivations, and I would like to explore that with them. But that is not for this place, that is not for this committee, that is for somewhere else in this council, where we should be asking searching questions of whose agenda is the CCG playing out and what is it all about from their point of view. Because the clinical view from the hospital, who deliver acute care, is clear. I think in terms of what has been said this evening of the CCG's view, I would like to understand what they are about and who they think they are representing. And that I do not believe, because it's financial and because it relates to other elements of planning that aren't planning in our terms, are beyond the remit of this particular planning application. It's not material to this debate at all, I don't believe. So, Chair, I really do want to speak in favour of this evening and say what a massive difference it will make to residents in my ward, and I think throughout the town and the borough, to have a facility of this kind in Basingstoke-on-Deane. Please vote for it. Please support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Have any questions for Councillor Harvey? No? Thank you very much. We now move to questions to officers, and before we do, I'd just like to say that we have Mark Philcox and David Earle from Hampshire Highways just along here. So any questions will be directed towards them. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Hope I'm kicking off some questions. Yeah, I think I'm on. First of all, going through the report, I've got some questions for officers. If I can refer to page 6 of 188. I nearly thought page 6. Down at the paragraph at the bottom of the page starting, the energy centre would provide the electrical distribution, heating, etc. in the form of biomass and gas-fired boilers. I'd like to refer you now to page 25 of 188 and the last line on the page. Question, please. They contradict one another. Well, they certainly don't provide an answer of where the gas is coming from.
Just in response to that, yes, the section on page 6 is referring to what is being proposed. On page 25, we're actually referring to the consultation response from Southern Gas. So there may not be any gas mains within the area that they've looked at the moment, but it doesn't mean to say that they couldn't be provided in the future.
This is going back, Chair, to there may be. This is a full planning application for this particular part of the proposal. Surely a solution should be provided within the report that we know it's going to be supplied. Otherwise, we're getting approval for a maybe. And we've always questioned this, especially when, okay, we get a statement from a utilities provider, but isn't there going to be a solution? And isn't there a condition that puts this onto the applicant to negotiate to get the supplies necessary for this thing to function, especially a hospital?
As with any new development in any new area, there would be those negotiations with the utility companies to provide those services to that particular development. This sits no different to any other development that doesn't have a connection at the moment, but it doesn't mean to say that there couldn't be a connection in the future through negotiations with those relative utility companies.
Fine. And Chair, I put the point. Southern Gas, no gas mains within the area of inquiry. The implications of laying in gas mains means they have to be buried. It could be going across agricultural land. It could be the disruption in highways. We've all seen it, that it happens. So a condition is absolutely necessary to cover this, because it can ruin landscapes. It should be a condition that everything gets returned to normal. It could be done by negotiation, but this committee has to ensure that it's imbibed within any permissions that we give.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to that point raised by Councillor Miller, I understand the point and the fact that as a full planning application, members are concerned to see all details. The issue is that gas supply and utility supply are not matters that would normally be considered under the planning application, on the basis that if a utility company through their statutory undertakers permitted development rights have to provide those connections, that can be done under a different matter. It's not normally part of the planning application.
Fine. I'd like to move on to something else, and that is parking. There's various comments about the parking provision in this particular establishment, and I believe 1,350 employees would be working at this establishment. Bearing in mind it's a 24-hour operation, they're going to be working in shifts. And I'm afraid I can't remember the actual page, but the list of how much parking is going to go to staff, how much for visitors, and everything else. I had the experience some years ago of working at an establishment. It was on the outskirts of central London, which was probably as big as this, and certainly had the similar kind of number of people working a 24-hour system. They got the car parking wrong because they didn't take into consideration the shift change. Can we assume, or can we have some assurance, and you can look at the parking arrangements that we've got at our local Basingstoke Hospital to see what can happen when you get an expansion of facilities and staff. It's pretty much of a nightmare. But the parking considerations, certainly because of the staff, and primarily the staff and not so much the visitors, should be able to encompass a shift changeover. That needs to understand the modus of the shifts that change over. If you have 500 on a shift, you've got somebody to change over, you've got 1,000 potential car spaces needed. Maybe you can reduce that by 10 or 15%. Has that been put into consideration, or has the officers just accepted what's been given to them?
The development proposal includes the provision of 801 car parking spaces. However, in order to address the way in which those spaces are managed to take into account peaks and troughs, shift changes or any other matters that may occur, there is an obligation in the Section 106 agreement that requires the provision of a site access management plan, and the purpose of that plan is to ensure that those matters are explained, and that demonstrates how the parking provision will be utilised efficiently to ensure that it works such that the parking demand is contained within the site.
So it's in the 106 and it's managed by that. Again, not explained in the report because it's critical. This is something different to a household development. This is a one-off. It's a big facility, and we should understand completely what is going to be, or how it's going to be managed. But again, it's shoved off to another time. It makes me a little nervous on that. There's a comment. Oh yes, transport and further development in Basingstoke. I noticed that because the settlement boundary is going to extend in the future, there was an argument within the report that this hospital will actually come almost adjacent to the settlement boundary. That's looking into the future. And this is a highways question now, the highways comments that are put into this, are they taking this application on its own, or is it an overall increase in the traffic generation, bearing in mind the local plan we've got under examination at the moment, and the development spreading south of Basingstoke? We can't have one saying we're extending the settlement boundary, but then just taking this particular site without considering that extension of the settlement boundary and the traffic generated from those developments.
Yeah, hi, Mark Wilcox from Hampshire County Council. You'll have to forgive me, I'm covering for a colleague today, so I had visibility of this as of this morning. So just quickly reviewing information now for you, if that's okay.
Sorry, Chair. Just whilst my colleagues from Hampshire Highways looking at that information, just to really clarify the officer's position in the report in terms of the extended or reference to extended settlement policy boundaries. The report, and I know this goes beyond the highways issue, but on that point that Councillor Miller raised, the reference to extended assessment policy boundaries is with regard to potential growth in Basingstoke area. The report fully accepts the fact that the emerging local plan in itself doesn't carry significant material weight at this time, and none of the reasons for approval have been on that basis. So the reference from that point is that it is a departure from current local plan policy. I know that will come up in another part. I believe my colleagues from Hampshire Highways now can respond to the point on the highways part and what commitments have been taken into account in the transport assessment.
Yeah, apologies for that. The assessment that was undertaken by the applicants did take account of Longwood, Copse Lane and the Kennel Farm developments, but I think you're referring to the Hanson Fields and the sort of golf course developments. They weren't covered per se, because they're not sort of part of the sort of the plan as yet, but the TA did obviously cover future year growth up to 2024, i.e. application year plus 10 years. So they have accounted for sort of outgoing growth up to that sort of level.
May I assume that that is just car journeys, or have you taken into public transport? Bearing in mind you're now throwing the timeline out to 2024, and the referral in here to bus journeys, that the NHS would only fund public transport for 3 years?
I believe a, sort of, a robust trip rate was used for vehicles accessing the site, and that was then obviously formatted forward for the future years. So I believe it took a robust approach to vehicles accessing the site in terms of the impact on the local junctions.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've got other things I'll say a bit later in the appropriate time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Chair. I have a two-part question for the officers. Firstly, a note from the report on page 76 of 188 that the design of the building, and in particular the height of the CTH, has not changed since the consultation and submission of the planning application. And it also mentions there's some third-party concerns. Could you expand on that, please? Secondly, on the same page, the statement of community involvement indicates that 480 people attended the 3 events, of which 74% of the respondents expressed support to the principle of development. Can you confirm that is the case, and we'll be interested in a little bit more detail, please?
Okay, so page 76 within the report is referring to the community involvement in the public consultation exercise that was taken by the applicants prior to the submission of the application. There were a number of events that were undertaken, and those events included the display of various montages, designs, illustrations of the proposed development. That actually included the overall site layout plan that you have had before you this evening. which shows the site in its context and all the buildings. That included the CTH building and its illustration of its full height, as you have before us now. So the height of that building has not changed. It's just the interpretation of those plans at that time by those people. So yes, there have been further concerns raised during the course of the current planning application that the CTH building has grown in size to the 6 storeys, but those drawings haven't changed from that earlier public consultation. With regard to the next paragraph and the statement of community involvement that referred to 480 people attending the events, unfortunately I haven't cited the figure of how many total respondents there were in terms to give that 74% figure. Unfortunately, I just don't have that information in front of me at this precise moment.
Councillor Taylor, did you put up your hand?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, while we've got the Hampshire experts with us, which is quite unusual, I'd quite like to ask them the question that I asked the applicants. Obviously, the applicants, I want to talk about the impact on the country lanes, and the applicants obviously have said that they don't think there'll be many people approaching from that area. Have you done any modelling or anything of this? There's over 1,000 people employed. There's due to be around about 10,000 people moving to Manydown, and the direct route for them will be just down the 300-400 and round the back lanes. Is there any modelling that you've done which will give us some comfort on that question?
Yeah, the comfort will come on the work that we've looked at this is that, yes, there may be some people, I mean, as mentioned earlier, there's certain population centres, small ones, that sort of Alton, Alresford, Oakley, that may, for example, obviously Manydown as well, that may potentially sort of run through. The main centre is obviously Basingstoke Centre itself, Winchester, and the rest will obviously use the main routes to get to the site. The mechanism that we have to obviously control this is obviously through the 106. Obviously we've got the access and parking plan, the site access management plan, the travel plan, obviously the direction, signage strategy. Obviously they have to be agreed by us before the development can proceed. Obviously we did get today, obviously the North Waltham Parish Council 17 points. We got that this morning. I've had a brief scan through some very good points through that. But obviously if it does get obviously approval, we will obviously work with everyone locally to sort of get the points on board to make sure they're put obviously within those sort of strategies.
So thank you. So you'd work with the 3 parish councils to try and get to a satisfactory solution to what seems to me to be quite a problem?
I've already arranged to have a meeting with one of them already. If it obviously does proceed with this, possibly we'll extend that to the 2 as well. That's fine.
Any more questions to officers, members? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a general question. This is a hybrid application, so am I reading from our brief at the beginning that we're agreeing the actual finish of the buildings and the construction materials? That's the first question.
Yes, you are correct. This is a hybrid application where we are seeking full planning permission for the CTH, the Critical Treatment Hospital, and the Cancer Treatment Centre, as well as the Energy Centre. So we have full details of the elevations, floor plans of those buildings, with the materials to be covered by condition. It is only the proposed pathology lab and the ambulance station that we don't have those elevations and those precise details for, and those would come later as a reserved matters application, again with the materials to be considered through a condition for further approval.
Thank you. If I may then, don't want to particularly drag it out, but all we have is information that it's white brick concrete panels through to curtain walling. Can you possibly just give us your take on the pictures we see? Or what I can see grey there or black. Is that what I'm reading as in the description? Could you be a little bit more precise? Just give us a feel, please.
The illustrations that you have seen before you on the presentation this evening, they are perspectives that have been provided by the applicant. Yes, there are certain tones and shades within the buildings, and hence why we have that condition to secure the final colours. So while some of this building may look dark, that may be partly through to the representation of the printout itself and the scanning of it. But again, we still have that control through the planning condition to make sure we get appropriate shades and tones of the buildings in order to assimilate it more into the countryside.
Any more questions? Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor Bowyer.
I sort of saved this one to this particular stage, Chair, because it's something we're trying to get hold of. I'd like the officers' take. It was about this CCG versus the Foundation Trust. You know, we've got the applicants pushing this forward, yet I still haven't seen or heard the full content of this letter from the CCG. I don't know if now's an appropriate time to somebody to explain it. But doesn't this take us along to a viability issue? It's in the public domain, and viability is something that we speak a lot about on this committee. We have done over the years. Is that not a material consideration in this particular case?
With regards to the letter, I mean, would happily read the press release that was made by the CCG. It's reported quite thoroughly in the update paper. There's not a great deal more than what's summarised in the update paper, and obviously the applicant's response to that. As I say, read that in a moment. With regards to the viability and I suppose the recommendation, the report to committee already set out that irrespective of what happens with the planning application and the decision on that, that it recognised that there would be a consultation process required through the CCG thereafter. So effectively that final decision, if you like, as to how or whether it would go ahead is not something before this planning committee for consideration at this time. What is before the committee at this time is an application put forward by the Hampshire Hospitals Trust, who state that they are the clinical experts, if you like, in designing the service delivery and the model to achieve that. What we have taken in terms of the recommendation is to say, well, taking that model forward, the social benefits of the provision of the hospital can be weighed legitimately as a material planning consideration. In the reasons for approval, as you know, planning applications can be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In the reasons for approval, what we are setting out is that we consider that the evidence provided in the application demonstrates that there is a material consideration here, which, whilst there is a adverse landscape impact, which again is clearly set out in the report, is nevertheless outweighed by that other material consideration. And all other matters in terms of biodiversity impact, highways, etc., we found that there's no technical reason to refuse the planning application. So that, if you like, sums up how we have dealt with the issue of need. Certainly in terms of, for clarity, as it has been referred to a number of times this evening, I think it would be appropriate for us to read that press release as it is in the public domain already, but Catherine will do that now.
Thank you.
Councillor Potter?
Would you like me to read?
Sorry, hang on. The officer wants to add to that.
Can I just make a point because it relates to Councillor Miller's comment?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, can I, in terms of the issues that Councillor Miller's raised about viability and the like, I mean, can I contradict what he says in the sense that as a planning committee, well, we have repeatedly been told that financial viability of the applications before us is not a matter for the planning committee. Sometimes, to our frustration, really, when we look at offers of 40% affordable housing that don't materialise, with developers coming back and saying we can no longer afford to do this. And we do not say to applicants, as certainly to my recollection, can you prove you have a demand for your product or your service that may be the subject of the application that's before us. So let's be very clear about it. The history is not as Councillor Miller relates it.
Thank you. It's questions to officers now, but appreciate what you're saying. Councillor Bowyer, you...
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, we've got a very difficult decision to make tonight because there's lots of fors and against. But one thing I would like to say...
Is this a question?
Yes, it is a question. There's two questions, actually. One, have other sites been considered for this? Because I couldn't see anything in the paperwork.
In response to your first question, yes, other sites have been considered. There was a site selection process which is detailed page 57, page 58 onwards in your agenda before you. The resolution or the conclusion of that has come down to this particular site in terms of accessibility and its relationship to the greatest areas of population within the county.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, if we were minded today to approve this application, could there be a condition put onto it that if it didn't go ahead for a hospital or a medical facility, that it couldn't be used at a later date for housing?
This application is for the use that is being proposed before you. Any other application would have to come back for a full consideration in any event, so it would have to have its own planning application against its own material considerations. But I would refer you to the description of the application, which is for the permission of the critical treatment hospital, the cancer treatment centre and its associated infrastructure.
I know that, but a lot of people here today are worried that if it doesn't go ahead for whatever reason, we have opened the floodgates to let planning happen on 50 acres of agricultural land.
Chair, hopefully just so I can provide the committee with some comfort here. I mean, the only reason for the recommendation for approval is based on what is being proposed under this planning application. If a further planning application came forward, let's say, for example, housing, that would have to be considered on its own merits under the policies dictated, to assess that planning application. So it wouldn't necessarily set any precedent for further development of this site if a different or alternative development proposal came forward. Chair, I was just mindful that we've been requested through a number of times through the evening to read the statement that was submitted by the CCG. So if this is the appropriate time, we would do that, only in terms of obviously clarifying what was stated, but as I say, it had already been covered quite extensively in the update paper.
So in just reading the press release to you, this came from the NHS West Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group and the North Hampshire Clinical Commissioning Group, dated the 23rd of September. It's entitled The Future of Health and Care Services in North and Mid Hampshire. As you know, we have been working with Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust over the last 2 years regarding their proposal to build a new critical treatment hospital near the M3. To reach an informed decision, we have taken into account a number of factors, including our acute commissioning strategy, a health gateway review, a review by the Wessex Clinical Senate, and have again reviewed our financial position. The conclusion of this review, which is being recommended to our CCG governing body for approval, is that the proposal cannot go forward to formal consultation at present. The primary reason for this is that the predicted costs of services supplied in this way significantly exceed the funds available to commissioners. We have also been heavily influenced by the national initiatives emerging as a result of the 5-year forward view, which clearly steer health systems towards whole system models of care. For that reason, we are now recommending that we launch a whole system programme to redesign health and social care across North and Mid Hampshire. This programme will engage the public at every stage. It will be clinically led and will encompass acute, community, mental health, primary and social care. The objective will be to design a health and social care model which is high quality and affordable. The future of acute care will be a significant part of this programme, because commissioners do accept that there is a need for change, which includes the centralisation of certain services. There are other potential options, but it is still possible that a new critical treatment hospital near Junction 7 of the M3 might emerge as part of the preferred option for the new health and social care model and, if so, would be part of the public consultation at that stage. These recommendations are being considered by our governing bodies next week. And it concludes with, should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us.
Are there any further questions for officers? Shall we move to debate then? Anybody want to start it off? Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Potter, followed by Councillor Bound.
I'm happy to give way to these two gentlemen if you prefer, having heard from two of the ward councillors. I will. Okay. I mean, obviously, the principle of a hospital complex such as this is commendable, and we would naturally want it in our borough. I mean, I would agree with everything that Councillor Harvey said. It looks superb and it looks great. However, our enthusiasm to encourage this project to come our way shouldn't make us lax in looking carefully at all of the detail and the consequences. And there's just something about this that seems to me to be a bit hasty and premature, and there needs to be more thought through. And I don't think from what the CCG says, that it would delay things greatly if they went back to the drawing board a bit to address some of the issues that have been raised tonight. As I say, if you look at the broad idea, it's absolutely great, and I would have no argument with it whatsoever. I would love it. But I simply think that more work needs to be done, as time passes. And the three main reasons for this, and obviously there are many more, is first of all this issue of need. We have to look at the issue of need. Policy D8, which is our key policy that we're looking at, says that if we're going to mess up the countryside in this way, it has to be for an identified need. And we hear of one need from the applicants, and we hear of a completely different need from the people who are going to actually bring it into being. And I just think that needs to be clarified for us. We don't want to be working in the dark. I'm not talking about finance. There's nothing to do with us, the finance of it, but it's whether or not we want this model or whether or not we need the more holistic model which the CCGs are now talking about. Let's just go back, just ease off a little bit and go back to the drawing board to see that. Number two is the design. I think it's noteworthy that policy D8 says this, and I quote, "Development proposals should complement the character of the rural settlement and the character of the surrounding landscape and not be harmful to the rural environment." An example of this requirement, if you look at the Hampshire Clinic, I think it goes beautifully with the surrounding. It's nicely designed and it settles into its surroundings quite well. This proposal seems to ride somewhat roughshod over our policy D8. It's hard to see how this harsh and high and angular design can possibly be described as complementing its surroundings, which is green fields and rural villages. And I think it can't be hard to just change it so that it fits in better. It just seems to have been done so hastily that we've got something that's a little bit bog standard, and that's what we're trying to get away from in Basingstoke. And finally, my third main reason is traffic. The viewing panel saw the constraints down Trenchard Lane and those very narrow country lanes. I'm not convinced that it won't be used and it won't cause tremendous problems of congestion down there. And at the moment, I can't see a satisfactory solution to this. I think it will do harm to safety on those narrow roads and on the character and amenity of those roads. I would ask, I'm not going to because it'll open up a whole new thing, but why isn't this in our local plan? I don't quite see how something can fly in on our blind side and not even be in our local plan, which is about to come forward with all the checks and balances that go into that. But anyway, ignore that. I don't see any sequential tests from other sites either. But for the three reasons I've said, and some of the others which have been cited by objectors, I don't feel at this time I can support the proposal in its current form. But if it is adjusted and thought through a little bit more, I don't think it will delay them a lot because there's obviously going to be delay anyway in funding. If it's thought through a little bit more, then I think we could get something really good. Thank you.
Yes. Did the hospital get an opportunity to reply to the CCG letter? I don't think they did.
Chair, on that point of clarification, as already set out in the update paper, the applicant's agent did provide a specific response to the CCG press release. Those points are summarised, as I say, in the update paper. We do have a copy of that letter as well, so for the purposes of balance, if the chairman would like to have that letter read as well, so the committee has both the press release and the response, then we can provide that, Chairman, if you would like.
So, in response, the agent provided a letter dated the 1st of October, and again entitled Hampshire Critical Treatment Hospital and Cancer Treatment Care Centre, and I shall just read through the letter. You might welcome clarification of the strategic context to the application made by Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, which is currently being reviewed by the Planning Authority, given the recent statement from the local NHS clinical commissioning groups. The strategic goal of Hampshire Hospitals is to improve medical services for the population it serves across North and Mid Hampshire. The development of the Critical Treatment Hospital is crucial to delivering that goal. The proposal for the CTH has been developed by the HHST as the expert providers of acute hospital services in the area, in conjunction with the GP leaders of the local commissioning groups, and the principle of centralising services to make better care and safer has been supported by the CCGs. It therefore has strong support from local clinical leaders. The population of North and Mid Hampshire will benefit from better and safer services for the sickest with the opening of the critical treatment hospital. This is because it will ensure 24/7 consultant-delivered treatment to patients with life-threatening conditions such as heart attacks, strokes and major trauma. The associated Cancer Treatment Centre will also ensure our population can access radiotherapy and other cancer services closer to home than their current options of Southampton or Guildford. The proposal reduces the cost of delivering those hospital services compared to current costs. The role of the clinical commissioning groups in the NHS is to purchase a wide range of healthcare services for their population. Their upcoming challenge is to meet the increasing health needs of the population with inflation-only increases in allocated funding. They need to find a plan for the future so they can afford to buy all of their healthcare required for their population, which includes mental health and community care, as well as hospital care. Hampshire Hospitals recognise the NHS-wide challenge and believes that centralising the most acute services into the CTH could facilitate changes that would help with this. It will of course be a matter for the CCGs to determine the timing of the necessary formal consultation process with patient groups and others. We are clear, however, that progressing the planning application at this stage places us in the best possible position to move forward swiftly to implement improved services following the consultation process, in the event of a positive outcome. Hampshire Hospitals is clear that obtaining planning approval will assure the local population in a future public consultation that the proposal for centralising acute services into a critical treatment hospital has a viable site solution, as well as being the right clinical and financial solution. I hope this letter emphasises the strategic benefit of the CTH and its role in improving medical treatment for patients across North and Mid Hampshire.
Councillor Potter, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. Firstly, just to remind us as a committee again, really, our responsibility this evening is to look at this application and no other, and consider that on its merits, and that's what I'll seek to do. I know it's been said already, but I want to say it again. I do commend the officer and officers for the comprehensive report that we've got in front of us. There's an awful lot of work gone into it, and I think it covers every aspect of the matters that we're considering. In regard to the consultation process, there is one element in here that I want to quote from directly, if I may, and I think it is relevant, and put it on the public record. In the report on page 76, there's reference to this consultation process sits separate to any planning application, but requires to first ascertain if planning permission would be granted for the physical infrastructure which would enable such reorganisation to occur, i.e. reorganisation of the way the Trust provides its services. And we've heard some comment from Mary Edwards about that. That seems a very logical approach to me, really. If you get planning permission to build the critical treatment hospital and the other things that go with it, then in a sense the process of redesigning the way those services are provided is then the subject of additional and separate consultation. Absolutely logical steps, and I don't think that contradicts in a way the points that the CCG is making. I also want to just make a comment, if I may. Councillor Taylor has said how much she likes the Hampshire Clinic and its setting and its site. So do I in many ways. Theoretically anyway, I have to tell you. But it wouldn't be an appropriate site for this critical treatment hospital. That's the fact of it. Whereas this one that is being proposed tonight is much more appropriate. I do want to quote again, if I may, from the report, just so it's on the public record, and I can't really improve the wording, but in the conclusion, the point is made, which I think covers all of the things that we need before us this evening. What is said is the development proposal comes forward as a departure from the development plan, and we know that to be the case, having regard to the wider public interest generated by a new clinical strategy to be implemented by the Hampshire Hospital Foundation Trust. It is recognised that the development proposal would result in a significant change to the landscape character of this countryside location and generate new traffic flows within the vicinity of the site, but in turn would meet a particular community need and provide capacity for existing facilities in the Trust catchment area. And that's important as well. We tend to think, and we've said a few things tonight which are a bit parochial, but this is just not Basingstoke and Deane that we're considering. This is the wider catchment area that is going to accommodate this clinical provision for a growing population in the long term. My position is, Chair, very clearly, I support the application that's before us. I support the officer's recommendation that we approve this evening. I see no merit in deferment, and I put that forward, Chair, straightforwardly as a proposal for approval.
Councillor Bound.
As I'm next up, I would second that. I was going to sort of quote from the conclusion as well, but I won't bother because Councillor Potter has just done it. I was one of only the 5 people, I think, who went on the viewing panel the other day to view the site, and we viewed it from a footpath across the valley, and were asked to look for an oak tree on the far horizon, which we duly did, and I could spot the oak tree. I don't think it was particularly prominent on the horizon, but we were told that the hospital would extend a little bit above that particular oak tree, and of course it would extend along that skyline as well. However, I did happen to note that down in the valley happened to be the M3 rumbling past with a huge amount of traffic, which to me was far more was going to be far more obtrusive than any view of a hospital on the horizon, which eventually is going to be screened quite well. The traffic, well, I think that's been adequately dealt with. It is a critical hospital. The number of visitors that are going to be turning up at the site to visit critically ill patients, I would have thought, was going to be relatively few. So what we're really talking about probably are the staffing requirements there. And I'm sure that a good travel plan can take care of that aspect. In terms of patients arriving at the hospital, surely they're going to be coming on the quickest routes, which don't strike me as being down the back roads through Dummer or North Waltham. The design, well, it's a hospital. I mean, I think Councillor Harvey adequately put that. It's a hospital. And hospitals are what they are, and they have to be able to satisfy a clinical need. They're not there as something which should be necessarily something nice to look at. And bearing in mind that I don't particularly think that its prominence in the countryside is so detrimental, as I say, I have no, I'm quite happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Westbrook, followed by Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. In some of the rhetoric used in relation to this application, for example, a dangerous precedent and urban sprawl, is something I don't believe this development deserves. A hospital COPS set in a rural, peaceful and natural environment with the aim of saving lives could serve the community as a whole who may have the misfortune to use it. In planning terms, we can only follow the local plan and the MPPF, both of which offer no specific guidance in addressing new hospital developments. However, the need to provide for healthy communities is reflected, and Save's Policy D8 provides for such an exceptional development adjacent to rural settlements, stating, planning permission will be granted for development which the council is satisfied will meet a genuine local need, such as health. It appears the location of this site has been selected for centralisation, speed of access by road and by air, which is paramount for patients, and serious efforts appear to have gone into building it into the landscape and mitigating adverse impacts from night skies. Planning control is about a broad public interest. Therefore, I support the officer's recommendation to approve this application, as it would be only the third of its kind in the country, a state-of-the-art hospital and of great community benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. We all understand the benefits of good healthcare facilities in our area, and largely, and certainly when I walked into this room today, I was in favour of it. But this application
as it stands, in view of the uncertainty of funding, isn't an application for a hospital, it's an application for a potential hospital. And acceptance of it would change the status of this land permanently. It will be considered a brownfield site by any developer wanting to put anything on that site other than the hospital that we want there. And I appreciate that any other facility put there, whether it be housing, a different sort of hospital, will be subject to a different planning application. But a developer will use the existing planning permission as a lever in their favour to impose something on this district that we don't want. So I would ask that you refuse this as it stands. At a later date, when funding is definitely in place, if that ever occurs, I would be more minded to vote for it. Second consideration, as I've already said this evening, is the external appearance of the upper floors. They are absolutely square. To me, it looks like it's been designed by a 5-year-old on a drawing board. Any architect worth his salt could design something which is clinically acceptable from the inside, which has got to be the major consideration, but could design something that was softer with curves and would blend into the landscape far better. This is a horrible building, and I remind everybody of the incinerator in Chinham, which is the same shape. We were told 15 years ago that the trees round that would grow and it would be suitably screened. 15 years later, it isn't. It's a blot on the landscape in Chinham, and this will be a blot on the landscape in Dummer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have listened very carefully tonight to the arguments, both for and against, and sense emotion involved. But at the end of the day, it may well be a very ambitious scheme, but there's nothing wrong with that. One thing we must abide by is material planning reasons. Speculation doesn't help. The goal is quite simple, is to build a critical treatment first-class hospital, and I endorse that. I have no hesitation in supporting those in favour of, because it's needed, and speculation, like for example saying it may never be needed or required, is purely speculation. The same with funding. We must be very careful when we talk about funding. That's not part of the remit of this committee tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, interesting, the Chinham incinerator was brought up, and that's nobody probably realised, that's very close to my heart, perhaps people probably realise, spending many years trying to stop it being built. But one of the things that seems different between this proposal and that proposal was when we see the view that, the artistic view, and whether we can put that back up, the sort of percent, that's the one, there seems to be an attempt, and we've seen some of the pictures, to actually make this a pleasant place to should I say, be ill in. It seems to be an opportunity for Basingstoke to be able to put a building of this size in the country with enough landscaping around it to actually blend it away. And some of those views we've been looking at seem to suggest that's true. And I think one of the key elements would be in the planting plan, please, 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 let's plant trees that screen and look good, and not this native species rubbish, because I was fobbed off with a Chinham incinerator with some Wellingtonia trees, and they were going to grow, and of course I, like an idiot, accepted it, and they're about my height now, and they've been there about 10 years. So I think if we do this sensibly, we can make this good. It's an opportunity for Basingstoke, as Councillor Harvey said. You know, when my time comes, I'd love this place to be where I go to be sorted out. And, you know, where would we put something like this somewhere else closer in the town? We couldn't hide it, we couldn't do it, we couldn't access it. So I think the final comment from me is, I mean, yeah, clearly I support it. And if it isn't going to be built because of shenanigans between accountants and those that are the clinical experts, such is life, it won't be built. And as we've said from our head of planning, it's another planning application if somebody wants to come along and bring it on. You know, we will sort of defend the land depending if it's relevant. So yes, I'm for this, and on the balance of the evidence I see. Thank you.
Councillor Bowyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've listened very carefully tonight, and I have reservations about the transport up to it, especially at the moment the bus service would only run for 3 years. I think these are things that can be sorted out. I think it offers an excellent opportunity to the people of Basingstoke. Not only are we going to get, you know, this wonderful hospital, albeit we don't like the design very much, but we also have to look at the bigger picture, that it could provide a lot of jobs for people that actually live in Basingstoke. I think we need to be very sure that the transport links, the ways of getting there are really looked at properly and the conditions adhered to, so the people that live in Dummer and the surrounding areas are not disadvantaged, because it would be sheer hell if they're, you know, the sat-nav takes them right through the village every time that it goes there. It is a 24-hour operation, so there will be lots of comings and goings, but I think that can be managed with the right parking and everything, and I think I reluctantly will approve this.
Thank you. No more? No. The officer would like to clarify 2 points.
Sorry, Chair, there's one point, because I think the discussion that members have had has clarified one point already. It was just in response to, I think just before any vote is taken, just for absolute clarity, the point that Councillor Westbrook raised regarding adherence to policy D8. I mean, the reasons for approval was put forward is saying that it is a departure from local plan policy, including D8, on the basis that it's not considered to be small scale. And I know that D8 has been referenced a number of times this evening, so I thought it was important to clarify that point, Chairman, before the vote is taken.
Right. We have a proposer and a seconder for approval of this. Those in favour, please raise their hands.
Includes me.
Sorry, the motion is therefore approved, and Catherine, would you read out the conditions, please?
Just to confirm, this application has been approved subject to conditions which are listed within your agenda from page 78 onwards, as well as the revised condition within the update paper and the verbal update requiring an additional condition with reference to drainage.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask also that we take some account of what the parish councils have requested, and ask that there is consultation with North Waltham and Dummer parish councils and ward councillors with regard to drawing up a travel plan, access and parking plan, and routing and directional signage, please. Nobody knows these things better than local people. And also, condition 10 regarding lighting is very good, but obviously it is a concern to Dummer, and I would ask if there's some consultation with Dummer Parish Council when the detailed lighting scheme is submitted.
Chair, if I can help with that, and certainly I understand from colleagues from Hampshire that that would happen, but just I suppose so that it is recorded, we could certainly include an informative note on the decision notice to set out the committee's desire that the applicant consults with those groups first on the travel plan, etc., and then obviously that would form part of the work that Hampshire does on the lighting as well. We can include a separate informative to draw that point out in bringing up the details for condition 10 regarding lighting.
Right. Now we'll take a 5-minute adjournment to sort ourselves out. Thank you. Right, members. We now move to item number 2. And to present, officer presenting is Anne Wilkinson.
This application is for the erection of a new car showroom and workshop at Jewel Road, following the demolition of the existing buildings on the site. Members recently viewed this site, and you can see that in the update report. Also, you will note in the update report there's some additional information about the location of parking along the north east and south east boundaries, and also about the proposed acoustic fencing, which is considered to be acceptable. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the main report.
Thank you, Anne. I have 3 speakers. Objector Mr. Tyso, in support John Stone, and the ward councillor, Councillor Harvey. And we'll start off with Mr. Tyso, please. He's not here. Therefore we go to John Stone, in support. You will have 4 minutes between you, and I'll give you 1 minute's warning at the end.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is John Stone. I'm the head of business for Harwood's Group, Jaguar and Land Rover here in Basingstoke. This application is hugely important for the Harwood's Group. We are a family-owned business, and we now employ 68 staff here in Basingstoke. This application, if implemented, will allow us to increase that number by up to 15 full-time employees, and provide us with the ability to expand this workforce in the future. As an established business here in Basingstoke, we contribute hugely to the local economy. We currently employ salesmen, technicians, cleaners, receptionists, drivers, and most of whom reside here in Basingstoke. Our staff have an average annual wage in excess of £30,000 currently, and we also actively support an apprentice programme for motor vehicle graduates from Basingstoke College, and indirectly support lots of other businesses in our day-to-day activities. We use local suppliers for flowers, for catering, for showroom supplies, and all of even our newspapers come from the local shops. The reason for this particular application stems from the recent success from Jaguar Land Rover. This brand, now engineered and manufactured completely in the UK on a much larger scale. In order to ensure that their retail network has the capacity and premium retail environment to meet such growth, Jaguar Land Rover require all franchises to upgrade or replace their existing facilities. The site at Jewel Road is ideal for this purpose, and the proposals will also dramatically improve the character and appearance of this site. We shall also be retaining our existing complementary facilities at Edison Road, where we reside currently, for BMW, servicing, used car sales and additional parking capacity. As members are aware, we already have planning permission to convert the existing workshop and provide new showrooms and display parking on this site. However, the existing workshops are structurally obsolete. They also have limited sound insulation and would struggle to accommodate the high visual standards and for the new branding requirements. Consequently, this new build solution is proposed. Initially, this was cited in a similar position to the approved scheme, but following comments raised by your officers and the ability to incorporate a redundant part of the public highway, we have now been able to move the proposals to a more central location on the site. The proposed buildings will now be materially further away from any dwellings in the existing workshop building and the approved scheme. We are aware of the comments of local members and nearby residents, and we regret that fuller consultation was not undertaken. However, we had felt that as planning permission had already been granted for this site, this revised, smarter proposal would be well received. Nevertheless, we acknowledge as such concerns and would like to touch you brief on the improvements that will result.
By constructing entirely new buildings, we will be able to incorporate much higher standards of thermal and sound insulation than would have been the case in converting the existing buildings. The very nature of modern building services and even valeting relies on equipment which significantly reduces noise output. In any event, we have agreed for the provision of noise reduction measures such as workshop doors and to the valet bays and an acoustic fence along the boundaries with the residential properties. We've also planted a number of trees along the same boundary and intend to reinforce such proposals as part of the new scheme. We are also fully prepared to comply with all of your office's proposed planning conditions. To conclude, I would like to reaffirm the importance of this application to the Harwoods Group, our staff and the local economy. Jaguar Land Rover are currently adjusting their boundaries in this region, and it is therefore vital that we're able to offer upgraded facilities.
Can you finish off now, please?
We therefore trust you'll be able to follow your officer's recommendation and to approve our application in order to secure the extension of our franchise here in Basingstoke. Thank you for your time. I'm now available for questions with our architect and my group head of business.
Members, any questions? Councillor Potter.
Is that me? Sorry, hello. Can I just clarify, in terms of the impact upon the residential dwellings, which are now, as you say, further away from what you're proposing than they were before, but in terms of the noise aspect, where things like servicing the car, valeting, the washing of cars, obviously all of that, which is, I think, potentially enclosed, but there is a tendency oftentimes, I think, in some garage businesses, obviously, to stray out into the forecourt areas and the like, obviously, which carries the noise out. Can you give us any assurances that you will be able to control this, even without conditions, obviously, in the way that this business will be conducted?
Absolutely. The equipment that we will be using is, as it becomes more modern, the noise is a lot less. By the additional acoustic doors to the rear of the valeting bay, it will be contained. So these units will be, the exhaust fumes will be extracted away, so it's all going to be internal. We're not going to have that capability just to drag everything outside and start, move that operation outside. So it will be quite fixed. Obviously drainage is important because that will be put into the rear of the valet bay. So noise and, staying within the conditions, it's not going to be easy for us to suddenly start moving outside.
Any more questions? Councillor Westbrook.
Can I just confirm that there's a 2.4 metre parapet, I believe, is it? It goes up where some of the cars are on top of the roof, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, sorry.
Hello, I'm Ken Watson, the architect. It's actually 1.6 metres, and the intention is to use that parapet to screen the cars behind the parapet.
Sorry. So that means it's the cars are pretty well hidden behind, and movement in and out is going to save on the noise as well, I guess, hidden behind this wall. It goes all the way around. Does it go all the way around? Sorry.
Sorry, yes, it does go all around. It's an important point, this particular roof deck parking is provided storage parking only. It's not accessible to the general public. It will only be lit from within, such as bulkhead lights on the inside of the parapet wall. So vehicle movements will be of a sort of sedentary nature, because by the very nature of car businesses, they need space to store vehicles awaiting preparation, vehicles awaiting servicing, and so on. The general public will not be, it won't be used for display purposes at all. And the parapet does go all around all four sides of it.
Any more questions? Thank you all very much then. Next, Councillor Harvey. Four minutes and I'll give you a minute's warning.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the first thing just to say to members is that we're not challenging, as board members, myself and Councillor Laura James, we're not challenging the principle of the development here. That's established. What we're challenging here is some of the detail, and very much asking for your help, really, and particularly those of you who have been down to the site and seen the site. Our experience with the Auto Plaza has been hit and miss, really, to be perfectly honest with you. We've got experience of the jet washing and valeting of vehicles that has caused considerable problems for our local residents. It's that balance between wanting to support a local business but also the amenity and enjoyment of our residents of the properties in which they live. And there's an important balance to strike there. We welcome the business. We've got no issue supporting the business being in the local area, and it's great what they're saying in terms of employment. But that's not the point really I'm raising, and nor am I asking for your help here on that point. What I'm asking is, if you look at the proximity of the residential units to the facility, for example, the parking in the southeast quarter, for example, the fence line and the planting, is it enough to qualify the potential impact on local residents and those gardens in particular at Millard and Hillary, which are the closest to that corner of the facility? It's a shame, really, that the applicant didn't seek to consult with us or our residents. That's why we've got letters of objection. That's why you've got us as the ward members raising these questions here tonight. We would have welcomed a proper engagement where we could have raised all of this, discussed it all, and sought mitigation with them directly. The positioning of those valeting and cleaning bays at the back of the property would have been something we would have questioned, and we would have liked to have seen cited differently in this particular design coming forward. Again, not challenging the principle, but talking about the detail. Again, the parking in that corner, we would have liked to have challenged that and have looked carefully at that with the applicant to examine that impact upon our local residents and their proximities to their garden. It's interesting what the applicant says in regard to the fence line and the parapet and how that will obscure, if you like, the rooftop. I think that's an important point, because there was concern raised about people standing on the top of the building and having a potential overlooking of gardens. Now, that's addressed. Now, that could have been dealt with out with this committee in a proper piece of consultation with us, and I wish they'd engaged, like I say. So really what I'm asking the committee to do is to help us with the conditions. The officers have done a great job. I think the officers' report is fine. I've got no issue with that at all. It's just, can we be guaranteed? And just taking the applicant's word for it, we've done that in the past and we've come sorely unstuck with jet washing that's been moved out into the forecourts and to the areas around our residences, the residences of that area. And I'd like far more than just an assurance from the applicant. I would like a commitment, a proper commitment from them, that they'll honour that in the way they've described. And again, in terms of the environmental and agency bits, 140 of 188 in the officer report, they are important points. I don't think they should just be advice notes. I would be interested to know, just in terms of the security of the operation on site, that it won't create contamination, it won't create issues. I'm sure it can be addressed, and I'm sure they are addressed, but simply having them as advice notes is a concern for us. Again, don't want to stop the business, we welcome it, it's just the detail that we're looking for, and we would very much welcome the committee's guidance and help in that respect.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for the Councillor? Yes, quite a number. Back you go. Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Miller. Anyone else?
I'm assuming that this is preferable to the extant permission that they could implement if they got to move on. You prefer this? Okay. You don't have to say it. Yeah, he's saying yes. The other thing, could you say again what it was that you actually, what condition you actually want? I understand about the Environment Agency. What was the first one?
It specifically writes to, you have the two enclosures at the rear of the building for valeting and for what they intend to do with jet washing. What I want is not just an assurance from the business. I want a commitment from them, hence a condition, if you like, that they will use that facility, that it will not bleed out onto that forecourt area like it does with the other Auto Plaza facility or the other showrooms that we have in the area, because it does, and it causes huge issue for our residents. It is an issue for our environmental health officers in particular in dealing with it. And I guess that's my problem, really. If we'd have had a consultation exercise, if we'd gone through this beforehand here with the applicant, we could have raised all of this. That's why I'm asking for your help.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Harvey, the condition 22, all valeting on site should take place inside the valeting enclosures. Now, I understand that the jet wash is next door to the valeting. Unfortunately, I don't have the applicant here to ask him, but that's my understanding. I don't know if we could adjust that particular condition, all valeting, and jet washing shall take place inside the valeting and jet washing closes. Now, that's what I heard from the applicant with this presentation. Would that ameliorate your concerns in this particular case? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Hood.
I'll keep my remarks for the opening debate.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bound.
It's been dealt with, thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood, as the other ward yes, do you wish to speak? Good.
Firstly, you must understand where we came from. In a sense that the Auto Plaza is up there, which is quite complex indeed. And this new application is very close to Hillary Road and Miller Close. But the important thing is that the applicant has already made a few changes by reciting and improving the area, so we're grateful for that. But when we go back to the Auto Plaza experience, which is all to do with other car companies, I think between us ward councillors and the enforcement officer, I think we spent the first 18 months arguing with them. All the conditions was laid down, but they ignored that. And what Councillor Harvey and Councillor Laura James is asking for, as well as me, is that we can make sure the conditions are so strong that should they step out of line, then there would be penalties against them. But apart from that, I'd be quite happy to move the application and look forward to working closely in future with the company. And one thing that stands out very closely, that if all developers were to work closely at the early stage with the parish council, or indeed the local town council, borough councils, it would go a long way to diffuse some potential schemes which would cause great concern. So I thank the officers for their endeavour, and hopefully that you can sort of tie up conditions such that we will feel safe in our beds, in a sense.
Thank you, Councillor Hood, and I echo your words.
Just to clarify, I think that's probably a good point that for condition 22 that it should read, all valeting and jet washing on site should take place inside the valeting and jet wash enclosures.
Thank you. We're into debate. Any more? Councillor Miller. Oh, sorry, questions to officers. Yes, I was jumping the gun. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one for highways. From the plans I can't see, and the plan up there I can't see, can you tell us the provision for car transport or offloading? Is it contained within the site, or is it going to be on the public highway?
In support of the application, there is a delivery management plan, and that includes a vehicle swept path for a car transporter, which demonstrates the ability for that vehicle to enter the site, turn, unload, and then leave the site in forward gear.
Any more questions for officers? No. Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Harvey also requested a condition concerning the Environment Agency's comment on page 123. I don't understand it, so can you translate that into a condition in any way?
If I can just draw your attention to the informatives, that advice has been added under informative to the applicant. Yeah, it's not something that we would be able to condition. It is just an advice note, and it gives them the advice of environmental regulations, etc., and what they have to abide by. I don't think we could tighten that. That they've come to us and said, could you add this on as an advice note, which is what we've done.
Thank you. Any more questions for officers? No. Then we'll move to debate. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've sorted out a few of the details, but what I'd like to say is I am very pleased to support this application. It's the kind of expansion of businesses that we would encourage in Basingstoke. I think, do I have to declare an interest because I own a Land Rover? Yes. I don't think so. I got mine serviced at a private facility. But no, seriously, I was very glad to hear the applicant mention that they carry out an apprentice scheme, because that's very important, especially when they're expanding their workforce. There's some excellent BCOTS courses that are done for automotive students, and I thoroughly support their approach in that regard. And we've had various discussions about expanding the businesses within Basingstoke, and I think that this is an example that some more businesses could follow. I fully support this with the annotations on the conditions, and I'll certainly vote for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Potter.
It's not a contribution, Chair, just simply, I don't know whether Councillor Miller did it, but if he didn't, formally seconding Councillor Hudd's proposal for approval, that's all.
Thank you. I have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour, raise your hands. Unanimous vote. Thank you. Anne, will you do
the application is recommended, is approved, subject to the conditions of the report and the amendments to condition 22 to include the reference to jet washing and jet washing enclosures.
Thank you for that. We now move to item number 3, 27 Winchester Street, an external illuminated projecting sign. And this is being introduced by Suter.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of an externally illuminated projecting sign and an externally illuminated fascia sign. If I can just draw to your attention the update paper, we've received further objections from Basingstoke Heritage Society, and the officer's recommendation is for approval.
We have no speaker. I have no speakers for this, questions to officers. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I keep pressing the button tonight, but there was one thing that jumped out at me at this. Bearing in mind that part of Winchester Street, it's a very nice building, it's very old grouping around it. And it was one of the objectives in there. Public observations, I think it is, on page 146 of 188. And the last bullet point, about the 2 foundation stones that are placed on the front fascia of the building. And then I read that the marble, or a marble of some kind, and good looking, is going to be removed and have I believe, a wooden blue fascia to the building. I would strongly support the retention of those marble blocks with those inscriptions, because that's part of Winchester Street and it's part of the heritage of this town. And I am quite sure the applicant can modify his frontal area to retain those 2 particular marble blocks. It's a shame that part of the heritage of this place is disappearing. It does in various forms, and I'm a little surprised that we can't put a condition that those 2 blocks are retained. That's my contribution anyway.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Westbrook, followed by Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit surprised that the marble itself is being removed. Is there any particular reason for that, other than choice?
Sorry, I think it's more to. Sorry, I think it's more to do with their branding. That's the William Hill colours. That's what they've chosen to do. The conservation officer has no objection to the removal of the marble. With regards to Councillor Miller's comments in terms of the inscriptions at the foundation stones, you could always change the condition 1 to say, notwithstanding the details approved, that they have to retain those 2 elements. You could always amend the condition in that regard. But they haven't given a reason as to why they are taking the marble off, but equally, from a conservation point of view, there's no objection to it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just just reading the objection from Basingstoke Heritage here, where they actually say that other areas in conservation areas, I mean, they use a different type of sign and not necessarily their corporate sign that's there. It just seems a bit strange, you know, they didn't think, I mean, I guess that marble, how long has that piece of marble been there? Is it the same length of time as the rest of it?
Councillor Tucker, followed by Councillor Taylor.
Ah, brilliant, thank you. Can I just be reassured, is this the same site that we had a planning application for William Hills? In which case, with a lot of nodding going on, why do you need to be looking for a planning application for a change of a sign when all it would be advertising Hills, but wouldn't have anything to do with the shop underneath?
I think this application came in at the same time as the change of use application, which came to committee, I think, back in August, I think it was, which has been refused. At the moment, the agent has submitted an appeal to the planning inspectorate. It's not been validated as a valid appeal yet because the inspectorate have a backlog of work, so there's a delay there. From the agent's point of view, basically it's just an application for an advert that wouldn't be implemented if they failed on their appeal. Obviously, if they were successful on the appeal, then they have an advert consent that they will then be able to implement with the change of use permission if that was allowed by the planning inspectorate.
Can I just add to that? Is it possible, if we were to grant it, to say that it shouldn't be implemented unless the other appeal was granted?
I think the issue here is it's just a sign. If it wouldn't be logical for them to go and advertise for something that's not there underneath it. That would be my point of view. But we wouldn't be able to condition that they can't implement this, and it would be subject to an approval on an appeal.
Councillor Taylor.
Just on the same lines, really, though, are they actually planning to remove the marble? In which case they could start doing that, couldn't they, without even putting up the sign? And it would just seem a pity if we didn't put some sort of condition on to tie it in with their planning permission or not.
I mean, the marble could be removed tomorrow, irrespective of whether an advert consent is approved or not. There's nothing to stop them. It's actually not works that require planning permission.
Councillor Miller.
Chair, could we have it crystal clear, if on the suggestion of Sue that we could adjust condition 1, we could keep those inscriptions in place?
I think you can change condition 1, so it would be notwithstanding the details approved, or you could add an additional actually probably better to add an additional condition that says, notwithstanding the submitted details, within 1 month or prior to the commencement of development, an amended plan submitted showing the retention of the foundation stone. We've done that before on conditions.
Could I propose that as a formal change or an additional condition, Chair? And then I'd be quite happy with this. And I've got a feeling that
right.
I might get some support for that.
You say.
There's another theory here. The alternative could be that you could do an approval subject to the receipt of that plan showing the retention of the foundation stone. Obviously, if they're then, because we haven't got a representative here from their agents, if they're not willing to do that, then it could come back before you for you to then consider it without that stone being retained. That might be a safer way of doing it. Obviously, at the moment, they're still waiting for an appeal to go through PINS, so that I don't think that there would be any real delay or concern with them there.
Councillor Potter. Oh, sorry.
So I was only thinking of you getting home tonight, Chair. Really, if I could just help things along. I mean, I don't have an issue, I have to say, with the application as it stands, and I'd move approval if I can go to that stage. I'm impressed by the Conservation Officer's views on this, but if it meets with the approval of the committee that the additional condition is added, vis-à-vis the marble plinth, then I'm happy with that as well. So I move it as it is, but if members then want to add the additional condition, then I would be happy with that as well.
Councillor Miller, are you going to second it?
I'm going to second it, Chair, and I'd like to have that condition included. And I'll take officers' advice of how the wording goes and how it's handled.
Good. Right, I have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour? Unanimous.
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't vote. Vote against.
Any abstentions?
I was against.
Any against?
Yes.
One.
Thank you.
One against.
If I can confirm then that the advert consent be approved, I think the opinion here is it would be better to do it subject to the receipt of the amended plan to show the retention of the engraved foundation stone.
Right, we move to item number 4 now, Newnham Edge, Tilney Lane. And the officer presenting is Anne Wilkinson, and I have speakers in the form of Mr. and Mrs. Bingham and Mr. James. Mr. and Mrs. Bingham. Mr. James. Oh, yes, that's what I thought. Jumped the gun for me. Okay, for it.
This application is for the erection of a double garage and workshop at Newnham Edge, Tinley Lane. The double garage and workshop would be to serve a 3-bedroom dwelling that has previously been approved. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the main report.
Thank you, Mr. James. The long bar.
My name is Dr. Peter James, and I thank you for the opportunity of speaking. Sadly, our agent Ian is bedridden, and he apologises for not being here this evening. We have read the officers' reports recommending approval, and we would just like to add a short piece to it. We are aware that there has been claims that we will change the hedging, and we would like to assure the committee that we will not do this in any respect. We're committed to the maintenance of the natural hedges, and the rural appearance of the site. Although the site is already very heavily screened by existing natural hedges, we will continue to reinforce both boundary hedges with indigenous native shrubs and trees. We would like to also point out that we have considerable widespread support within the village and the parish for the development of our house and our garage. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for Dr. James? No?
Oh, yes, can I?
Yes? Councillor Tucker.
Sorry, I noticed it says on the first floor there's an office included, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. After 40 years in the NHS, I'm retiring finally with this into my retirement house, but I will be continuing an interest in local medical education, and I was very excited about what was going on earlier. So, and this would be an office that I would use for medical education processes, you know, for keeping notes and records and such like. So that would be my little sort of quite small office, which is separate.
Any more questions? Thank you, Dr. James. Councillor Robinson, I understand you're in place of the ward councillor.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a letter here which originates from Clive Pinder and he asked Councillor Goddison to read out tonight. Councillor Goddison couldn't make it, so it's been passed to me. So I have no personal knowledge of this case, but I do have the letter. It reads, as ward representative and a neighbour to the scheme, I have been asked by two of the direct neighbours to make a statement on their behalf. I am unable to attend in person, so I have asked for this statement to be read out. I support and endorse their comments, which are shared by two of the 4 homes that are directly impacted by this development. The neighbour's statement, which follows, accurately reflects the concerns and reasons to object. As residents of the adjacent property to Newnham Edge, we were consulted by the applicants, Peter and June James, in December 2014 about the erection of a new residential property, now approved. They made the effort to visit us, walk through the plans and explain their motives around downsizing from their current dwelling. We were invited to object and chose not to on the basis of the relative scale of the property being designed as modest in size and not imposing. The fact the James family agreed to locate the dwelling as far from our boundary, a compromise which was sympathetic and which we agreed to. The plans shown, i.e. a single residential dwelling, and the discussion made no reference to a subsequent application being made around a double-fronted, double-storey garage, which would certainly have provoked an explicit objection for the planning application. The proposed building, i.e. said garage, replaces the space that was originally left vacant to reduce the impact on the neighbouring property. This decision was referred to in the original application. In light of the comments by the occupiers of Newnham Green Farm, the proposed dwelling was moved away from the common boundary with that property. In other words, the application takes away the critical concession in the original application. That both seems cynical and disingenuous. We have studied the plans on the Council's website, and it is apparent that the drawings detailing the new double-fronted, double-storey garage were made in December 2014. Yet subsequent applications for the garage were explained to us as an afterthought. Our conclusion was that the plans to develop further were concealed from the Parish Council and its residents. The key issue of location has not been addressed. The new building does not reflect the linear development lines established down Tilney Lane, with the new building being almost the same size as an average 3-bedroom home, situated right on the edge of the curtilage and lane. Related to this, no matter how much screening is used, the development will be an imposing presence at the entrance to Tilney Lane and should be objected to on the following grounds. The size of the building is out of proportion with the host property at approximately 900 square feet. It is the same as an average 3-bedroom house. Contrary to the planning officer's statement, the height, bulk and siting of this development, as proposed, will dominate the natural and rural aspect of the entrance to Tilney Lane, which is a key feature of the conservation area. As such, the proposal will have an adverse impact on the landscape character and scenic quality of the area, as viewed from Tilney Lane. The dominance and proximity of the lane of this built form could be considered to adversely alter the character and sense of place in this part of the village, and therefore have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. The location of the building will result in undue loss of privacy or undue overlooking, overshadowing and overbearing or noise disturbance
1 minute to
impacts
go.
with the neighbouring properties. Thank you. That's the letter as written. I personally have no knowledge of the site or any of the issues with it, so please don't ask me any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Tomlin.
There was just one, Nick. Where was that house? Where was there? Where do they live on the? Does it? Can you relate? You don't know.
Sorry, as you know, I was subbed on an hour before this meeting. I didn't have time to do any homework.
No, very kind of you, but you can't, I'm afraid, under the rules.
Have you written it down?
It's the proposed garage would be approximately 68 metres from Newnham Green Farm, which Sue's just pointed out to you, 28.5 metres from Newnham Lodge, which is that property, and 65 metres from Newnham Edge. Yeah. It's on page 156 of the report, down at impact on neighbouring amenities.
Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Chair. While we're on the plan, is that a hedge? The squirrely bit, sorry. All the way around, right the way along as well. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Potter.
I know in terms of the letter that Councillor Robinson's read out, there was reference, as we often get, to subservience, obviously, of this new proposal as against the host building. I mean, literally from the plan we've got, and I haven't got anything else, it looks as though it's about half the size. I don't remember the original application thinking back, but it certainly isn't more than half the size of the existing dwelling, I don't think, is it? If the officers could confirm that.
Has it got a comparison? Yeah. The floor plan for the garage is 6 metres wide and 9.3 metres in length. I haven't got the dimensions of the house, but it would appear subservient to the dwelling house.
Any more questions? Can we go into debate then? Or motions or proposals? Councillor Taylor.
I know Councillor Pinder talked about dealings with the Parish Council, but I notice there's no objections from the Parish Council. I note that there's a substantial hedge around the proposed garage, and I note that there's a considerable distance from any neighbouring property, and so I would therefore move for approval.
Councillor Miller, Councillor Tomlin.
I'd like to second that motion, Chair, and I think the materials used, I've got some little experience about this, they actually blend in very well into the kind of environment around Newnham, and from what I can see of the plan of the house, it would complement the house and not stand out at all.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, that was all dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I have a proposer and seconder for approval of this item. Those in favour, please raise a hand. Any refusals?
Only having been subbed on an hour before the meeting, not having any chance to study plans or anything, I really feel I can only abstain from it.
Fine. Right.
The application is approved subject to the conditions in the main report.
Right, we now move to item number 5, Rooksfield, Bishop's Green, Hampshire. It's introduced by Sue Tarvett, and I have one speaker in the form of Mr. Cobbold, and I apologise for keeping you so late, all of you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just draw your attention to the update paper and the comments from the viewing panel. There's an error in the last sentence. It should read, the last word should read actually for approval and not refusal. So I do apologise for that. There's a slight error there. And also, just an additional consultation response has now been received from Natural England, and they raised no objection and don't wish any conditions to be imposed, so the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Sue. Mr. Cobbold, you have 4 minutes, and I'll give you a minute's notice towards the end. Do you know what to press?
Thank you, Chair. Right, the officer report sets out why the application is to be granted, so I'm just going to respond specifically to the objections raised by the Parish Council and the neighbouring properties. Firstly, a couple of objections, they're incorrect and misleading, I want to just correct them. The site's not located in AONB, and there's considerable landscape proposal submitted with the scheme, which actually removes the existing landscaping, which has been deemed unsightly, and is somewhat at odds with the allegation which says no means of landscaping have been provided to soften the impact of the development. The number of dwellings proposed has been at the advice of officers who considered the previous application was overdevelopment of the site. Given the previous scheme of 5 dwellings, it's unfortunate that some objectors feel that the reduction is trying to circumnavigate the planning system. There's nothing of the sort going on. We've been in discussion with the officers. Furthermore, another objector is concerned with overdevelopment of the site, so it shows it's impossible for us to please everyone. The Parish Council has said that the site is outside the settlement boundary, which is right, and therefore it's an unsustainable site. It's the second part of that I'm going to pick up on, because it fundamentally overlooks that sustainable development isn't just a test of accessibility or the sustainability of the location, it's wide-reaching than that. For those unaware, the character of Bishop's Green has altered in the late 2000s, is that what I'm saying? Yeah. When new development was built for 146 houses, replacing the existing housing area which was originally constructed for the service personnel employed at Green and Common Air Base. The 146 houses, shop, community centre and playgrounds replaced a previous housing area that was only 95 dwellings associated open space but which didn't have any facilities. So the local plan, when it was adopted in 2006, had Bishop's Green as open countryside. That's now changed considerably. So sustainable development. Paragraph 7 of the MPPF provides you with your clear definition, and it takes the definition beyond the simplistic view of accessibility. So the proposed development is immediately to the south of the existing southern boundary of the village. To the west is residential, and to the south is a row of tall trees, conifers, which will be removed. These detach the site from the rural areas to the south, meaning that this is a detached piece of land with little, if any, use going forward. So it will round off the existing residential development. So in terms of sustainable development, we've got the economic test, which refers to delivery of housing and the crucial role that it plays in the economy. We've got the social role, which refers to communities and the accessibility of services and jobs. And we've got the environmental role, with the proposed dwellings being sustainable, in line with modern building regs, and helping to mitigate against climate change. So the site's not biodiversity sensitive. It's overturned mud, which would not be a logical habitat for protected species. The only trees to be lost are row of leylandii, which are no visual or ecological importance, and their removal will represent a visual
1 minute to
improvement.
go.
Thank you. So in terms of the environment, the proposal represents an improvement to the landscape and biodiversity. Second concern of the Parish Council, and reiterated by some objectors, is the highways, and the suggestion that this was a narrow lane that would cause problems. Firstly, I disagree. I don't think it is a particularly narrow lane. Secondly, if considered in context, 2 dwellings will generate 8 vehicle movements a day, or look at another way, 1 every 2 hours. In the context of Brooksfield, this is a very small increase overall. Visibility for the proposed accesses is fine. It's acceptable for a road where traffic speeds are minimal. Just one final point I want to raise is that we're actually proposing bungalows, which, although there is a big demand for them in the market, they don't often come forward in the planning system for many reasons. So I think this is a great opportunity to deliver some. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Cobbold? No? No? Questions to officers? Councillor Miller.
If I could ask the answers, how wide is the lane? We said we've heard a subjective view of how wide the lane is. How wide is it?
It's 4.8 metres wide.
Thank you. It's a road. Cool.
Any more questions for officers? No? Thank you. Let us go into debate then, or a motion. Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Well, if I may, Chair, again, just simply, I mean, in fairness, the presentation of Mr. Cobbold, I think, is very clear, coincides with the points I would have made, probably nowhere near as well, really, but I have no issue with this. I think the proposal is sound in every way. The officer's report supports approval, and so do I. And I put that forward, Chair, as a motion.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Second the motion.
Thank you. I have a proposer and a seconder for this motion. Those in favour of approval? Those against? Abstain? 2. The motion is carried. And Sue?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just confirm that the application is approved subject to the conditions on the committee paper. One other thing to add is that the application hasn't been advertised as a departure, so we do need to put that in the press, and that has to run for 21 days, so we cannot issue a decision for 21 days, but after that time period, unless something new is raised that hasn't previously been considered, then we can issue the decision notice.
Thank you. We now move to item number 5. paper C. Sorry. Which you're going to introduce. Which Mike Townsend will introduce.
Thank you, Chair. This is just to bring back to the committee the resolution for approval at the Burnham Copse site in Tadley. Members may recall that there's a resolution to grant planning permission for 36 dwellings at a previous committee meeting, but that resolution was subject to referral or consultation with the ONR as to whether they wanted to refer the matter to the Secretary of State for call-in. That consultation exercise took place, and during which time the SIL regulations changed as well. So the report covers two aspects really. One is the change in the resolution with regards to section 106, and one is to update the members on the ONR issue. Dealing with the resolution with regards to 106, the key change is that the resolution now would no longer be able to secure contributions towards transport infrastructure or allotments, because the SIL regulations changes on a number of obligations that can be pulled towards any one piece of infrastructure have now kicked in, and effectively there is no provision that can be identified for contributions to go towards on those two subjects. The other aspects, though, they're set out in paragraph 3.5 with regards to community facilities, affordable housing, landscape management plan, open space, playing fields and play areas, recreations would still be maintained. So if members were still happy to approve the application, those elements would still be secured. The other aspect was in relation to the referral to the ONR. The ONR initially indicated that they would not be seeking to call the application into the Secretary of State. That included, the letter that they sent through included reference to the Council needing to still satisfy ourselves that we comply with the REPIR regulations regarding emergency planning, etc., which then resulted in a further discussion with West Berkshire as the owners of the off-site emergency plan. West Berkshire considered their position on it and considered whether they in fact could call in the application to Secretary of State, because they had objected to the application originally as well. Following extensive communication with them, West Berks have confirmed that they are not going to do that, and therefore I thought it was appropriate to record that exchange, if you like, to members and ensure that members are still satisfied that they would like to approve the planning application. But in doing so, and in reviewing the reason for approval originally quoted, we did note that members on the first committee put considerable weight on the fact that it was a brownfield site, which wasn't captured in the first reason for approval. So I suppose in summary, the recommendation is threefold. One is that the application is still approved, but with the amended section 106 requirements. The second is that members consider and are aware of the comments of the ONR and West Berks. And a third is that if you are minded to still resolve to grant planning permission, that it is with an amended reason for approval to capture the brownfield element.
Councillor Bowen, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Can I just ask a question of the officers? I note that Southdown Row Field and Tadley Green are part of the agreement in terms of improvements in the area, not from SIL, is it? How did you arrive at Southdown Row Field and Tadley Green?
Is this in regards to the section 106 spending, effectively? So that would have come out through the scoping scoping consultation which is undertaken when the planning application is first received. So those officers concerned with open space provision, play, etc., have to go through a process of understanding what the local community requirements are, but also to a level where they can satisfy themselves that they can justify securing a contribution in the first place. So that is effectively a consultation response that the planning officers would have received from colleagues in other departments.
So would ward councillors then have been, would they have been asked?
So not at that stage. The scoping pro forma is, I mean, this probably goes into another subject, but the scoping pro forma is available on the council's website in terms of the planning application documents. But I am aware that in terms of future spend of Section 106, that is a separate process at this moment in time with regards to how the money is spent in terms of release of capital funds, etc. So that's not secured at the planning application stage.
It's just that the application is in my ward, and both the improvements are outside my ward. I've just made.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. It's coming to the end of a fairly long day, and maybe I haven't quite grasped this properly, but we did grant planning permission to this originally? Is that correct? So if that's so, why SIL coming in when we had granted it under the old 106 regime?
So the resolution to grant planning permission was in February 2015. The resolution was subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and consultation with the ONR. So that completion of the Section 106 agreement never took place because the consultation with the ONR was ongoing. By the time the consultation response from the ONR had come back, the SIL regulations had kicked in. So it was only a resolution to grant planning permission, not an actual grant of planning permission at that time.
So they were parallel events, not serial events.
Thank you. Councillor Tucker.
Oh, it works. Yes, my favourite subject, ONR. In 3.15, you say that you have accepted an invitation to attend a meeting with the ONR and the West Berks to discuss developing policies, etc. Has that happened yet?
No, it hasn't. That meeting scheduled for a date in November. I can't remember the exact date. The basis of that is because I think the ONR and West Berks have concerns about this application going through, which is, I guess, their position, which is why we're recording it to the committee, but would like to understand moving forward how the different authorities can work together to try and resolve matters, if possible, ahead of applications getting to this stage.
Yes, thank you, because I'm sure people in Tadley would very much like to know what their position is, wouldn't they?
Yes, but I am already in contact with Mr. Townsend about this.
Any more questions? Move to debate. I'll move approval. Thank you. Those I have a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against? Abstentions?
No knowledge of the original.
2. The motion is carried. Do you want to say anything? With which we will close the meeting. Thank you very much at 9:40. Thank you all very much and good night.